Hello, everyone. Andres Gamboa here with another episode of the Ponytails podcast. And I'm very thankful that you're listening in. Thank you. Thank you. This means a lot to me. I am having a blast so far with this show. Hopefully, you guys enjoy it too. But if this is your first time, quick little bit about what we're doing, just so you know that you're at the right place. We interview people who sold books with Southwestern Advantage. They did this for 80 hours a week during their summers in college, and this company recruited them to do so. Now, this company's been doing this since 1868. I myself did 4 summers of it, and it was one of the wildest experiences of my life, which is why we thought it'd be a good idea to create a podcast asking people about their experience and see if it was just as wild. It turns out, yeah, it is. So, 200 and some odd episodes now, we've been doing this, and every single one has been as rewarding, as entertaining. And so, hopefully, you guys are rewarded and entertained. If you have any questions or if you would like to support us, make sure you guys follow us on all of your socials or the ones that you are most active on. That way, you guys can stay tuned for more information and things that are happening. And of course, so that way you guys can see when every episode's been dropping. We've had a blast on that. Most importantly, if you like what we are doing, the biggest way you can support us is by leaving us a review or a rating. If you're on Spotify, you can do the star rating. If you think it's 5, great. That'd be awesome. But if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, if you could scroll down on our page and just leave us a review there, we would love you forever because it helps a ton. I can't even explain to you how much it helps. And in order to help recognize some people and incentivize, we are going to start reading 5-star reviews that are left on the page for the people that did it. So hopefully you get recognized, or hopefully this means a lot. We're trying to help people get or catch people doing the right thing. And so we're going to try to make it that way for y'all as well. So here comes a review. Let me pull this up. So exciting. This last review comes from Informal Sharing. It's a 5-star review, so thank you. It says, I'm so grateful for Andres using this platform to connect Southwestern alumni. It provides an amazing space to highlight alumni's current successes in such a personal way. It's fun listening to everyone reminisce about their time selling books, and it's crazy to think how many of these stories likely haven't been shared in years. Oh, well, so fun. So cool. Thank you for that review. It means a lot. Thank you, Informal Sharing. Appreciate you, and hopefully you like some more episodes. Now, that brings me to my guest today. We have another Andres in the house. Whoop, whoop. Let's go. Andres Carrillo is with us. He sold for 3 summers between 2020, the year of the pandy, and 2022. Part of the Visionaries crew, which is Edgar Ibarra's crew. Love you, brother. Edgar, you're awesome. You have to have a common vision. I love how he says that. It's my favorite. Andres went to UTSA, that's the University of Texas in San Antonio, originally from El Paso, Texas. And his favorite scroll for Augmendino is I will greet this day with love in my heart, which is a beautiful one to be a fan of. So when I come back, we'll be on with Andres, not me, but the other Andres.
Hey, man.
What up? Whoa. I can't hear you for some reason.
Like looking at a twin.
Huh. Oh, I know why. Give me a second. Oh, what the heck happened? This is so weird. Here we go. Okay, what's up?
Wait, I was saying it's like looking at my twin right now.
No, dude, don't insult yourself like that.
Yeah, are you bald or do you still have hair and you just wear the hat?
Both,
Okay.
I guess. But my hairline is receding and my hair is thinning, so I just decided to beat it. Actually, the day that around the time you decided to start selling books, I decided to cut my hair because the pandemic happened and my barber wasn't open, and he was the only one that could kind of make it still work. And all I had was Tanner Nappy and a couple of hair clippers. And I said, if you can try to make it good, go for it. But if you mess it up, no problem. And first try, just bzzz. So I was like, just chop it at this point. So
Yeah.
I mean, I can still grow it, but it doesn't look as luscious as yours, though.
Yeah, my hair, it looks shorter than it is. I let Ella cut my hair and it's just kind of, I needed to look professional for the summer, but my hair has got pretty long throughout the semester. No one has gone bald in my family, so I'm holding out hope.
Lucky. Lucky man. It's just a matter of time for me.
Yeah.
I just decided to own it early, dude. But it's like thick. Look at it.
Yeah.
Your hairline is wow.
It's solid, man. But
I'm
yeah,
jealous.
is Danny balding too, or is he?
Are you asking me or are you asking Danny? Well, that's all. I'll answer it that way.
Okay. No, yeah, no, I don't know if you know Leo Riojas, but he sold, his last summer was also last summer, and he's been balding. And so his last couple years, he just shaved it too. So I know the struggle
That's
that
how it
you
is.
deal with.
I mean, at least I can grow a beard. Honestly, if I couldn't grow a beard and I just looked like Senor Clean, it'd be
Yeah, it'd be rough. I can't grow a beard though, so that's where I'm jealous of you because it's just face
I
constantly.
I like my beard so much that I'm okay with. I wouldn't trade you. I wouldn't trade that thick, luscious head of hair for this. No, the beard is a lot more controllable. Oh man. But thanks for being here, man. I wanted to say a couple things before we get started. And I wanted to thank you because you're one of the people who has really supported our show in a lot of ways. I know you're a big fan. You listen to a lot of episodes. I know that you try to promote the show. I know I've seen you the way that you interact with our social media, and I really want to thank you for that because it's because of people like you that this works. I would say that the growth that we've experienced, the healthy growth that we've experienced, has been the biggest. The biggest that we have too is our guests, right? Who give their time to just come on the show and share their stories and be vulnerable with us. And you're one of those people now. And the second biggest group of people has been the big supporters, and by supporters I mean people who listen to every episode, who sign up for our stuff, who subscribe to our things, who comments and share our things. And you've been a big part of that. You, Angie, Jacob Levine, Pat Roach, when he was first guest, he was like, I've listened to every episode, and that's a big help. That's not something that we expect out of anybody. In fact, I don't expect anybody to listen to anything I have to say, but I really appreciate you being a supporter. And so thank you for that, man. It's really nice.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you do something cool here, so might as well, right?
Yeah, thank you. That's really cool. That's a cool perspective. How did you do you remember the first time you heard it? Like how did like when you first saw the podcast, like what did you think? Like, I've
I
never
don't
asked some fan
even
this.
remember. I'm trying to think. I think someone else. It might have been in one of the like Facebook groups or something. Is
All right.
maybe the first time, but I had no idea who like anybody. I think you guys were like on episode 10 when I was
Oh,
like when I
you're
figured
from
out.
way back.
Yeah, it was like, oh my god, like this is kind of cool. And I like listened to that like first Brandon Q episode, and like, and then you guys start picking up, and I'm like, oh my god, they're getting like cooler and cooler guests. Like it went from being like a little like neg underground thing to like this really cool thing, and like it was really cool watching you guys do the interview with Dan Moore, like posting that, because I was
Yeah.
always, and I hope Dan Moore like goes on. But he's never going to retire. And then he retired, and then he's on. So I think
Yeah, we jumped on it.
yeah, I can't wait for that episode. I'm so pumped.
It's so good. It's so good. I'm gonna try to do some trailers for it, trying to build some hype, but it's so good, man. We talk about like how execs were made, like where execs came
Oh,
from. Yeah, like the lore of Southwestern stuff. And I asked him about how he got so good at public speaking and like where that came from. It was awesome, man. It was a lot of
yeah.
fun. So, but
He
yeah,
he's probably my best PC ever.
no doubt, right? He's probably everyone's best PC. He just who said that? That was uh Bill Zizzy. He's like, I'd rather spend an hour with 5 minutes with Dan Moore than an hour with Dan Rather or whatever. But for sure, that those Dan Moore PCs, man, they go a long way. All right, but let's jump in this thing, man. You just got done selling, so typically we'll just start with more with how you got recruited, so we can do a more chronological timeline.
Mhm.
I want to hear about your story about how you got recruited to do this thing in the middle of the pandemic. I always find it fascinating for people who sold their first summer in 2020 because it was a different vibe
Yeah,
and a
no, it was.
different experience than what we all experienced. So
Yeah.
let's hear about it.
So I kind of have a unconventional recruiting story. So I started selling books after my junior year of high school. So kind of different. And so
Nice. Wait, so
I
you're 18 right now, or you're 19?
20. I'm
That's
20.
still really young
Yeah.
for a third summer person. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm 20 right now. But yeah, so I started selling books when I was 17. Um, so kind of what happened was, so I was in El Paso, and for context, so like I was a pretty like high achiever in high school, and so and the main way for me to travel growing up was you would win an academic competition, and you'd make it to like state or nationals, and you got to travel. Um, and so that semester, man, like I put in so much work my junior year. I got like nationals for BPA, which is like Business Professionals of America, nationals for HOSA, which is like Health Occupation Students of America. Like I was going to go on all these cool trips. And during spring break, I had gone to like state for BPA. And I got back and I was like riding this high, and then COVID hits and like everything was
Shuts
canceled.
down.
Yeah, and I got like so depressed. I was like, "Oh my god!" Like, everything I had worked for was just gone. And my cousin, who's a little bit older than me, she was going to Texas Tech at the time, and she had gotten recruited to sell books like a couple months prior. So she hadn't gone out and sold. She just was on Alex Ramos Castro's team, Edgar's girlfriend, and yeah, so they were doing their thing, and Alex kind of put out this like referral competition to her, like, hey, if you have some people and they end up on the team, and you team member them, then I will give you like $300 if they get to sales school or something. And so my cousin was pretty motivated to get me there, and so she had texted me in December, and she didn't tell me what it was. She was just like, hey, like, what are you doing this summer? And I was like, oh, I have all these plans because I won all these competitions. And then she texted me again in March after COVID happened and everything got canceled. And I was like, well, I have nothing going on. And I'm just ranting to her. And she's like, hey, well, I'm going to go like sell stuff door to door this summer. You want to come? And I was like, yes, and it's kind of weird because, after recruiting and stuff, I just don't know anyone. I don't think I've ever recruited anyone who was just like, yeah, I want to go do that. But I think I was so desperate for like any change of pace that I was like, yes, like I'll go sell books. And so Alex was down in El Paso to do a parent visit for her dad. And so I go to the parent visit, so that I can get infoed right after. And when Alex tries to do the info for me, I like keep interrupting her, and I'm just like, wait, but like, how do I do this? Like, I don't care what this is. Like, just let me do it. Like,
Just sign me up.
yeah. So I was pretty persistent. Yeah, definitely a pony. Um, I was like, I don't care what this is. I need to get out of town. Like, I need to do something new. Um, and yeah, I just was super persistent. And Alex was really hesitant because she had never recruited someone who was still in high school. She was kind of unsure of the maturity level. And like, I mean, I didn't even ask questions about what I was going to be doing. So I guess my maturity level wasn't super great, but it worked out. And yeah, I like drove out and we did virtual sales school that year, which was kind of interesting. And like,
Yeah.
I remember, so we were in Waco for our kind of like, being in our little bubble to like quarantine and stuff. And I remember getting to my Airbnb before everyone else. And I just kind of sat there and I'm like, this is a fresh start. Like, I don't know what this is. Like, this is going to be something new, like in life. And so, yeah. And my life is completely different. Like 3 years
Since
later.
then.
So,
Wow, dude. So your parents, how did they feel about it?
oh man, they were super neg. They were, so, and I mean, it's been an interesting journey. So when I was getting recruited, my mom was pretty chill about it because it was her niece that was my cousin. So she was like, Giselle's smart, if she is going to go sell books and this is what she's doing with her summer, it's probably a good idea. So like, I'm okay with you going. And my parents are divorced, by the way. And so my dad was like, no shot. And it was I think he talked to Alex and then he was like tentatively okay with it. But I have this interesting relationship with my parents because I don't know, they were kind of so absent for a lot of my upbringing, if that makes sense, in terms of like what I did, so that it didn't really like matter. Like we have this weird thing where if I wanted to do something, I was just going to do it, and it didn't matter if they supported it, and they just kind of had to deal with it, if that makes sense.
Right.
Which is very weird for kids in high school. And so, but I was pretty independent, and so I went out and I did it. They did not stay supportive. I don't think my dad got supportive until after my third summer. So like
No way. Like
ago.
recently.
Yeah. And my mom was like on and off for a long time. She was like supportive in the summers and then not supportive out of the summers, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was
Wow.
an interesting thing. And part of it is just like parent child relationships are like strained, and so it's not even, I don't even think it's a Southwestern thing. I think it's just a me and my parents thing with a lot of it.
Hmm.
Um, but it was weird recruiting kids and having them have supportive parents. And I was like, oh, this is what this is like.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, your parents actually want you to grow. Wow.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
it's interesting right now because I'm living with the Hurleys and their daughter's selling, and they're so supportive. And I'm just like, this is so cool,
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna ask you because you told me you were with the Hurleys. I might switch to this view because we have. Is your laptop on something?
It's on my leg, yeah.
Okay,
There's
because
like no table. Is it moving a lot?
it shakes a little bit. So when we were all close, I was getting like a little dizzy. But so okay, so you're living with Steve. What's that been like? Because Steve is a fan of the show. We love Steve. And that's another person that I didn't forgot to mention just now. He like listen, he comments and he'll message me about episodes. I'm like, dude, Steve, you're the best. Thank you so much. So shout out to Steve. What's that been like living with them?
Oh man, it's been amazing. So I've been living with them since around Valentine's Day to like now. I actually leave back to Texas tomorrow, so I'll be back in like a couple weeks for like a couple days. But yeah, I mean, it's been incredible. It's really cool living with like alumni who aren't just like people who sold books, but like people who like really sold books.
Yeah,
Like Steve did what, like nine summers, sold
yeah,
10,000 units, was number one a bunch of times.
studs. Yeah,
And Ella like recruited 20-person teams, was like also super
yeah,
successful. And yeah, it's been pretty cool. And they have like a huge family. Um, they have 6 kids, and yeah, they're all amazing, and they're all super different. And so it's been weird interacting with some alumni families because, I mean, the main alumni families that I've had interaction with is like Jake and all his kids,
right.
and like Jake and all his kids are pretty similar, honestly, and they're all like, yeah, I want to go sell books. But like with Steve's family, it's interesting because like some of the kids were never going to go sell books, and then some of them are like built for it, and so it's just kind of a weird mix. And
That's so
I,
interesting.
yeah, Steve and Ella do a really good job of gauging, like they do a really good job of supporting what their kids are passionate about. So like one of their kids is an artist. One is about to move to California to be a scientist. One is selling books. One's in welding, and then one's still in high school. And they just kind of help them figure out what they're passionate about, and then how to be successful at that thing.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's been like a pretty cool parenting lesson. It's also been pretty cool. Like my family was like very cold and like split off, and they're very like warm, and everyone eats dinner, and I don't know. It's just like a home. So it's pretty awesome. It, like I think healed a lot of like childhood trauma. So it's been cool.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
So, okay, so hold on. So you get to sales school in virtual sales school, and then
yeah,
you guys sold over Zoom, right? For a while first, or how did that work?
yeah. So we did virtual sales school. So it was like a 2-week quarantine. So like the first week was just like all Zoom meetings on how to, like, it was like vision boarding and stuff like that, but it was also mainly like how to sell virtually, and like how to get referrals and stuff. And then the next week was all online selling, like for the whole week, which was not fun. Like, I don't think I minded too much like that week, but it really, when we had to do it like the next summer and the summer after that, it was not as fun. And then yeah, we went to sales school. Sales school was short, and that was like sales school was really tough for me. Like I think I had my sales talk memorized and stuff, but like the Visionaries are very intense. You know, Edgar's a big believer in like we're gonna do this to the max. So if it's we're not gonna sit in the shade at sales school. We're gonna sit in the like hottest part of the parking lot. Like we're gonna run everywhere and
Yeah.
uh, just like all gas, no brakes. And so that was
Which
really tough
which
for
I
me.
appreciate that about Edgar though.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was super helpful because, I mean, it was really good for the hardcoreness of the summer, you know?
Yeah.
It's like
Dude,
the rain, the sun, did it matter?
I was just at sales school because Danny was doing the Dan Moore part.
Yeah.
Um, and they were at the hotel, so they rented out the hotel that's across from Atrium Way, like not from the company, but like when you as you're back to Elm Hill or Elm Creek or whatever the
Yeah, I know which one you're
yeah
talking about.
Elk Pike whatever across the street. It's that hotel, and it has like a really nice indoor pool.
Yeah. Okay.
And so they were like the managers were having their meetings, so all the firsts were supposed to be out like practicing their sales talk, and some of them were outside in the sun doing
Hmm.
walking around doing their sales talk. Some of them were outside in the shade. Some of them were inside. Like the vast majority. Like
Yeah.
I'll say like at least 60% of them were inside. And then there was like four people who had like their feet in the pool, like just kind of like they were like looking at their sales talk, but they were like laying down with their feet in the pool, just reading. And I'm like, what the hell is this?
Dude, that's crazy.
And so we saw them
Well,
as
no.
Danny was already done with his talk, so we saw them. We just like look at him, what the hell? And Danny's like, hey, and he like tapped on their window. He's like, what are you doing? And like I'm just like, oh man, tell me you're not gonna have a good summer without telling me you're not gonna have a good summer.
Yeah.
Like just chilling in the pool.
That's like a Mr. Mediocrity talk, and then like let's just listen to that voice like immediately.
It was just after the Mr. Mediocrity talk too. He had done that. He did that Mr. M talk, and then yeah,
Oh man, that's insane. Okay, that's crazy because I remember. I mean, so I skipped sales school my second summer, but so I've only had two. Um, my first summer was like a blur, but was like really difficult. I remember, and then this last summer, like I grinded, and because I had this team, and I'm like, I need to be running around, and I can't even imagine like relaxing at sales school. That's so
yeah.
crazy.
Especially because you know that you're there. Like I don't know. Maybe we just had really good managers, but Steve was to me. He was like, there's going to be people that are going to be sitting down in the shade. There's going to be people that are going to be like doing like just messing around. He goes, but those people are not going to do well this summer.
Hmm.
So you can do that and have the same plan, but you know, it's going to be a bummer for you if that's what. Or you can just be like the other people who are going to be sprinting everywhere and only work out in the sun and sucking it up that it's hot,
Hmm.
and then that's the people that are going to kick ass. And I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Edgar, I think Edgar and Alex do a really good job of doing that same thing where like I mean, and they do it like to the extreme where they're like, we're the visionaries. We're known for working hard. Like we're known for doing all the crazy hard stuff that other groups won't do. So that's what you're a part of. Like you signed up for this. This is where you're at. And they do that from like the info forward. So it's like ingrained in you by the time you get to sales school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. And, you know, as a 17-year-old, you must have been like, whoa,
Oh
like
yeah.
these guys are impressive. Like, what was, what was your perspective of that?
Oh man, it was so crazy because like I've been living at home, and then I'm living with college students. Like my first experience living with college students is like this
Shit.
virtual sales school and the sales school thing, and yeah, it was pretty crazy, and it was cool just like meeting people. And man, I used to be so ridiculously awkward. And so hanging out with all these people who were just like super confident and stuff was just like kind of a game changer for me. But what I remember most, I think, from my first sales school was like just how impressive the leadership was, like Rao and Dan Moore, and just hearing them talk. And I've told Dan Moore this, but like it was the first time I believed that people could get married and stay married because like everyone in my circles back home had divorced
Mm.
parents. And so I was like, oh, I guess, that's just what marriage is. You just get married, divorced. It's like part of life, And then I see Dan, and he's been married for forever. And then Rao comes up and does like the man talk, Did you guys do that? Yeah. And talking about, being a good, husband. And I was like, man, I need to be a good husband. Like that kind of started changing things for me. And I was like, I think I need to stick around. I was one of those people who was like, I want to come back for another summer at sales school. Because I was like, I need to learn how to like be like these people. It wasn't even like, oh, this job is really fun. I was like, in all honesty, I was like, this job kind of sucks, but I will do whatever it takes to like end up like these people.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my sales school.
Yeah, when you meet people at sales school, and that effect is like very strong because you're like, whoa, these people know something else.
Yeah.
And if I stick around enough, I'll know that. And it's true, they do. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I can put they know what work ethic and good attitude can do, is what it is. And so that's what they focus on. That's amazing. Where did you go sell that first summer?
Mississippi. All of my summers have been in the South. It was Mississippi, Florida, and Alabama. And so standing out in the heat did something good for us because it was hot all 3 summers. And man, Mississippi fits the stereotype. I'm going to be honest. So
I can't believe it. Not many people have sold in Mississippi, but we've had some. And I mean, it's good territory, but it's different.
No, it's like a whole different world out there. You're in Mississippi because you'll start smelling cigarettes, Yeah. It was, everyone smoked. I mean, some people had front teeth, but like, man, it was like crazy. And so this is kind of funny. So one of my first days, I'm 17 and I knock on this mom's door, and it's COVID, so everyone has masks on. And she answers the door and she sets up an appointment for later. But I'm like, man, that mom was kind of attractive. Like, this is going to be awesome. And then I go back later that day for my appointment, and she takes the mask off, and she just has like no teeth, and it just killed it. I was like, this is like scared me. I was like, oh my God. Like, I just went from being like, oh my God, cool mom, she's attractive, like this is gonna be a fun time, air conditioning for like the first time that day. And then I was like legitimately scared. I was like, oh my God, it's like that book you read as a kid about the witches where like they're taking off the stuff. That's what it felt like. That was like Mississippi every day.
Bro.
Yeah, it was crazy. So
nice. How nice.
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude. Oh man. Well, was your like first store and first week okay? Did you get off to a fast start? Were you more like the slow starters? I mean, in high school, I can't imagine it being like the easiest thing to start and jump into, but I guess I don't know.
So I actually have all my summers are kind of just like ridiculously difficult and weird. So we started selling on a Saturday before like a Sunday meeting. And so we sold Saturday. I had a customer. It was great. I sold like a math set, I think. And then we go back on Monday. And then Monday I zeroed. And so Tuesday I go follow. And then Tuesday, I total my car on my way home. So day 3.
Nice.
Already no car. I flipped my car in a ditch at like 10 o'clock at night in the middle of like rural Mississippi. And that was like, that kind of explains my whole Southwestern experience. So yeah, I flipped my car, and it was pretty incredible. So both my 2 of my tires pop at the same time. I lose control, and in Mississippi they have like these water ditches on the side of the road, and so I go down, and so I start rolling, and I land in some trees, and it's so funny because you know how when you crash your car, music is still playing.
Yeah,
my like summer jams were still playing.
You flipped over and it's "We're not gonna take it."
Yeah, literally. I was like, it was crazy, and I'm just I'm honking and stuff, and so the problem is, so I'm on the side and I'm trying to get out from my door that's like moving up, but my door is stuck. And then the door behind me is like on the ground, but my window's broken. And so I'm trying to get through. But then I hear a guy, and he comes and he's like, "Don't go through the bottom door. Like there's a pond there. You're gonna drown." And I was like, "Okay, I'm not gonna do that." And he comes and my the door on top, I can't open it because it's stuck, because I rolled and it kind of like clamped shut. But he has tools in his car, so he goes and opens my car door, pulls me out. And I'm a big guy. I was 6'7" my first summer, and I was like big. I was probably
You're
like
still growing.
yeah. Yeah, I'm 6'9" now, but I was 6'7" my first summer. Pulls me out, and my phone has no service, and so he calls the cops for me, and I was like amazing, that like I think the only reason I'm alive is because of that guy, and I asked him to stick around. So I've never talked to this guy after because he immediately left. He was like, "I was only out here because I was buying weed. I can't be here when the cops come, so I called the cops for you, but I gotta go." And he just leaves. And the only reason he saw me is because he was driving behind me and saw it all happen. So totally like a God thing.
And your tires just popped? Like, were they flat or what?
No, I think, I mean, in hindsight, like they were probably not great, they were probably balding or something, but yeah, they just popped and it sucked for me because I remember I actually popped a tire on the way to my turf, like that, when we were driving from Nashville to Mississippi. And so I had just changed out like my tire, like one of the other ones, and it was two other ones that I hadn't changed yet that popped, and it was like super annoying. So but yeah, the cops came and my car was like, it took 2 tow trucks to get my car out of the trees. And they were like, "Yeah, no one would have seen you. Like you were so deep in the brush. If that guy wasn't behind you, you'd be down there. No one would have come by you for a while." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." So and I was so positive. Oh my God, I think I freaked Alex out. So I called Alex with the cop's phone and I'm like, "Hey, I just told my car, but 3 positives, and I just like listed stuff out. I was like joking with the cops. I'm like, "When we get the car out, I have a pack of bottled waters in the back. Like, do you guys want some?" And just like an insane person. Looking back, I was like, that's something a 17-year-old would do, not a normal human being. um, but yeah, so I was really positive about it, and that's when I lost parent support like hardcore. They were pretty mad, and so that next day I followed, and I was following Leo, who sold 6 summers, just finished his last one. Great guy, also at UTSA. And I go to follow him, and he's trying to cheer me up. He's like, "You should go knock on this first door. You're gonna crush it. It's gonna be okay." And I start running up to the door. This is like 7:40 in the morning, and I trip on one of the steps, and I face plant. And this right after getting a car accident, like. And I just was on the ground crying, and Leo's like, "You know what, man? They're gonna open the door, so you should probably get up." And like, the rest of the day, just like,
did you bleed or anything?
no, luckily I wasn't bleeding. My knees were scraped up, so they started bleeding, but like my face,
Oh no!
and it was just, man, it was rough. And yeah, my
It was
parents,
like you had the physical representation of what the summer feels like.
yeah, no, it was, man, it was awful. But I think like I was delusional. I don't know, like I was just so positive throughout the whole thing, and my parents were really upset. And so the next day, I'm a walker now, and I'm walking in the town that we work in, and or that we live in, which is Water Valley, Mississippi, which no one has ever heard of because it's like a town of like 2,000 people. It's like super small. They had a Piggly Wiggly, that was our breakfast spot, because there were no real breakfast spots within like 20 miles of where we lived.
God.
So the grocery store was our stop. And I'm walking that area, and I walked the whole town in like a day. But I'm dealing with insurance calls and stuff, and so most days we don't have our phone on us.
Right.
Did you find it? This is
I,
crazy.
I found the
Middle
town.
nowhere. Um, it's
Wow.
outside of Oxford, which is where Ole Miss is, by like 20 minutes. But yeah, there's nothing there. You're not missing much. There's a Piggly Wiggly, there's a Sonic, um, and one gas station. I think.
Hometown Pizza, Water Valley. Oh, Crawdad Hole now. Sonic. It's grown.
Yeah, it's grown. No, but yeah, you go there and there's nothing. But I'm working it, and I have my phone on me to answer, insurance calls, and I get a call from my grandma, and I picked it up, and she was like, "Hey, we're excited. We heard you're coming back. Your dad told us that you're gonna come back home. We're gonna throw a party for you." And I was like, I didn't quit. What are you talking about? And apparently, my dad had told everyone that I was coming back, and so that was kind of your curbside moment, the on the mud
The
pile thing.
dirt pile story. Yeah.
So it was actually so it's funny. So I kind of reached my breaking point because right after that call, I had a call from the insurance company, and they're like, "Hey, if you want to get anything out of this car, you have to be here today." And I'm like 2 hours away, have like no car, and everyone has their phones off, so there's like I can't get to it. And so instead of knocking for books at this point, I'm knocking to see if anyone can give me a ride to this spot so I can go through the stuff in my car, because a lot of it was like sentimental with my grandmother's old car, and so my mom wanted a lot of the stuff back. Um, and so I'm just like trying to figure it out, and I go to this lawyer's office, and I go in, and I'm like, "Can anyone help me out?" And then he's like, "No." Um, and so I just like broke down in front of this lawyer's office. And so I just start crying because my dad's basically like, "Yeah, you have to come back." And I was just like, Edgar refers to them as like socially acceptable reasons to leave. Like I was 17, I told my car I was going to have to be a walker in rural Mississippi. And my parents were like ready to have me come back. And I just had to tell them no. I was just, I was sitting there. Um, and I think my whole life, I just kind of seen my parents and the way they were, and then I saw how people were at sales school, and I think I was just so convicted in that I was just like, I have to see this through, like if I quit this, because my parents were divorced, and so for a lot of my life I was just like, I'm not going to get divorced, um, and so I was like, if I quit this, am I going to quit my marriage, was the thought. And so I just kind of kept going, and I zeroed out, the next 2 weeks. My first
Wow.
2 weeks,
And did you
just like,
lose all the stuff?
no. So eventually I got one guy who drove me out there, and I got the stuff. I got like a trash bag full, and we were good. But yeah, it's that
Wow.
was a win. But yeah, everything else, like no customers, um, and it was kind of crazy. And it's funny looking back because the reason for that is so they had me working Yalobusha County as a walker, and Yalobusha County is a lot of towns like Water Valley where there's like you could work the town in a day. There's like no one there, and so I was working there, and everyone was telling me like we don't have enough money. And I'm just like I keep going back to my student leaders, and they're like, they have enough money, man. Like they pay a mortgage, you're good. And at the end of the summer, I try to go back to Yalobusha County, and my student leaders are like, "No, why would you go there? Like they literally have no money. Like no one can buy books." I'm like, my first couple weeks of the summer, you were telling me to work here because you need like that they have money. But I got another car uh, for like $3,000, and I was able to go back to my original turf, and I started having customers like immediately. I think I had like 15 customers the next week. So I really don't think it was a skill issue. I think I just needed to kind of go through that. But yeah, so then I just went from there, and I started having, like 1 to 250 unit weeks. But then we ran out of walker turf, And so then what they did is they would start putting me with kids who were off schedule, and we would work 50-50. So we'd work like I'd work one day, they'd work the other. And so, yeah, that was kind of my summer. So I think in total,
Wow,
I
I've never heard of that.
yeah, it was just kind of like something they tried out. And I think I only, because I was doing well, but I didn't have a car. So I bought that other car, and that car broke down within a week. It was like total lemon.
Great.
Yeah, it's not great. I was like 17, didn't know what to look for in buying a used car, and like totally
And
super
the
shady.
person that sold it to you knew that.
Yeah, no, he was super shady. But I was like, I need a car. Gave him $3,000 in cash, and then never heard from him again. Um, but yeah, like awful car. It was like a Volvo, and to find a mechanic for a 2003 Volvo in
In
Mississippi.
Mississippi, yeah. Yeah.
So
No.
yeah, the car was a lost cause. So I have like no car, and yeah, it was just like a whole mess. And so, but I ended up working like 35 days or something. But I still hit Sizzler, and
Nice,
like
dude.
really, yeah, I hit Sizzler. I hit I Want to Win, and it was a good first summer. So yeah, it was a blast. I got asked to come back halfway through the summer, and I was like super down. I was like, yes, I want to come back, which was again delusional. And I had a delusional in a good way. I really appreciate my time with Southwestern. It was good. But I don't know what was going through my head. And I remember my roommate, because I had a really neg roommate who also finished the summer, but he was just like neg the whole time. And he used to tell me every day, if I were you, I would quit. And I just kept going. And
Just rocking your world.
yeah, not the nicest way to start my morning, but it was fun. And I had to move HQs a lot because I was basically going into every HQ and working their walker turf, because Mississippi is like super rural, so there's like nowhere for a walker to be. But yeah, so it worked out, and then that was kind of my first summer experience. There was lots of craziness. I grew up in El Paso, which is like majority Hispanic, and it was like the first time I had seen like white people and black people, like basically in my life. Like there was like 2 white kids in my high school. So I went from that to Mississippi, where it's 50-50.
Really? It's
Yeah.
that dense in El Paso. I mean, it's called El Paso. I get it, but
Yeah.
it's that dense in El Paso. There's no white people.
But, I mean, there are some on the other side of town. They live on the west side.
Imagine there's no white people.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Like, I'm gonna be going back.
Easy if you try.
Yeah, so I've been living in Atlanta, and I'm about to go back to El Paso, and I'm very pumped because there will like be Mexican.
Tacos.
Yeah,
Imagine no white people. Dude, we could do this.
yeah, yeah.
That's
There's some white
crazy.
people in El Paso. El Paso is like I think 95% plus Hispanic.
No way. I had no idea. I'm mind blown by this. And you went to the whitest state. Well,
Yeah,
whitest and blackest. I should say. Like,
yeah,
there's so many like black people and so many white people. There's no brown people out
no,
there.
yeah. I
I
think
think
I
maybe
met.
the whitest state might be like North Dakota. I just,
Yeah, I was just in the Midwest, and man, there are like only white people out
dude,
there.
I grew up in Nebraska. It was, I mean, our high school had a lot of Hispanics because it was like the biggest public school in Grand Island, which, so it
Okay,
was like, I think it was like 20-30% Hispanic, but there was a chunk of Hispanics. I mean,
okay,
and Grand Island, Nebraska is got like a lot of meat processing plants or food processing plants or corn, like a lot of like manual labor that a lot of Hispanics. So it does have a decent population. It's probably not like 30% population of Hispanics, but it
okay.
was still not the majority. Like there was a
Yeah,
lot, but it wasn't like, I mean, you can get good tacos anywhere, right? You can get good Hispanic food generally anywhere. But I mean, it was white people like
yeah.
everywhere.
It was a culture shock, man, because El Paso's on the border of Juarez, so it's basically just like Mexico, but they speak English on that side of the fence.
That's
That's basically what it is.
crazy.
And yeah, no, it was because like in my high school there was like a few white kids, and then there was a couple black people, but they were Nigerian, and
Mm.
so it wasn't like your African American population. And so it was really weird going to Mississippi. And this was like during all the George Floyd stuff. And like, so there was a lot of like racial tension in the town. And it was just like
Whoa.
nothing I'd ever experienced before. Cause like people were like, so it's funny. So my first turf was very racially tense. And then throughout the summer, I got to like bigger cities in Mississippi. Mississippi doesn't really have like cities.
Yeah, right.
But I got to their bigger cities.
The biggest city has the word little in it.
Yeah.
So
So like the biggest city I think I worked was 15,000 people, which is like nothing. Uh, and so um, but in those cities there was more integration and stuff, and it wasn't that big of a deal. But like the first turf I worked, which was Panola County, there was like a murder a few years prior where there was this black guy and this white girl. They were dating, and they broke up, and he lit her on fire and killed her and went to jail.
damn.
And ever since then, they just like didn't talk to each other. So like all the weeks I worked there, like when I would do pre-approach, it's like you don't want to talk to that family, they're black, or like like tons of that, and you were just,
Holy
what is going on? Yeah,
shit. And there's
so,
people that don't think racism is real.
yeah, but I mean it's there in Mississippi.
Well, well, and that's crazy because I was gonna make a joke about but I'm gonna refrain before I get canceled. Although my stand-up brain went to so many fun places,
Yeah,
and all of that was just said. But did you ever? Okay, this is gonna be a really weird question. I can't believe I've ever asked something like this. But did you ever experience racism then growing up? Since most people were brown, like
no, yeah.
wow,
So it's crazy because
in
like
Texas,
yeah.
that's crazy to me. Say more.
Yeah, no, it is crazy because like so it's funny because I was telling my girlfriend because I'm in Atlanta now.
I was gonna say
And
you're
I
wearing a
was
Georgia shirt right now, so that's really
yeah,
interesting.
so, I've been like my whole life have probably leaned more conservative because I'm like I don't get what people are talking about. Like racism
Wow.
isn't a problem. I literally like where I live, there's like no issues. Um,
Oh
and then I'm
my
like in
god.
Atlanta right now, and I'm like, okay, I kind of get it. Like, you
Yeah,
know,
it's
I,
bad, dude. And here's the deal. This is what's funny is that race has gotten politicized, which is outrageous.
yeah,
Like racial issues have become political, kind of like the vaccine became political. And I'm not here to judge people for which side of the fence they stand on, quite
mhm,
literally in this particular immigrant situation.
yeah,
Like I get it both ways. I understand. But without making this political, racism is a thing. It's not like it's people are like, hey, listen, 1964, everybody got the same rights. No, it's not like it was. Who was the comedian? He's like, it's not like it's like a clean shit that you don't have to wipe. Like
yeah,
there's stuff that has happened that is still not. And again, I'm not trying to make this preachy, but it's interesting to me when people think that there's no such thing as racism anymore. And it's like, just because it's not a problem for you personally, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Like,
yeah,
try
yeah.
walking around anywhere.
Definitely exists. Yeah. Um, like for context, right? To give you background on what El Paso is like. So El Paso is like majority Hispanic, pretty conservative in terms of values because it's largely Catholic.
Mm.
Um, but the city votes blue. It's like the only consistent blue city in Texas the last like 100 years.
Really? How big is El Paso?
It's the county's like 1 million people
That's
now.
a big town.
Yeah,
It's all, well, yeah, it's all Hispanic because the border crossed them, not the
yeah.
other way around. I see. I see.
Basically, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's literally like right. You could see Mexico from your house. Like it's right
Wow.
there. And so that's kind of the context. But like everyone is Hispanic. And something I realized living in Atlanta is like growing up in El Paso, it wasn't weird to see a successful Hispanic or a poor Hispanic. Like there wasn't a distinction. Like what your ethnicity was didn't determine your social class, if that makes sense.
Right. And in general, it doesn't, but
Yeah,
it does represent more obstacles. It doesn't mean that you can't succeed. It just means
yeah,
shit happens. But what you're saying is in El Paso, because everyone virtually was Hispanic,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it was like it was the equivalent of like being in an all black or an all white community where it's like, well, yeah, it's race has nothing to do with the fact that you're poor.
Yeah, exactly.
I see.
And then, but then coming to Atlanta, it's like some people don't have a concept that like there are successful Hispanics because they've like never seen it. So like I'm living in Buckhead, which is like very wealthy, white part of Atlanta, right outside of downtown. And you talk to people, and I don't think they mean this maliciously or that this is something that's like they even believe or that they're aware of. But sometimes when they talk to you, they're like surprised you didn't grow up in a shack, if that makes sense.
Welcome to my experience.
So it's just like, oh, like you grew up in a home with floors, you know?
Oh, or you get the classic. Well, and they don't. You're right. They don't necessarily mean poorly, but it's still racist. That's another thing. Racist doesn't necessarily mean malicious, although sometimes it does. It just means
Yeah.
racist, as in like because of my race, you thought of something of me that wasn't.
Yeah.
I, yeah, yeah.
And so it's
I get people being like, "Oh, you don't like spicy food?" I'm like, "No, Colombians, we don't eat spicy food." They're like, "Oh, it's like a different country." I'm like, "Yeah, exactly like that.
yeah, or
It's
people
like
think that
England
all
versus France."
the same.
Yeah,
Like, oh yeah, they're all just Mexican, you
yeah.
know? Because
Oh, the number of times I got asked what part of Mexico Colombia was in growing up, bro, it was crazy. I'm like,
like,
this is not real. Like, you're not
yeah,
asking me that for real.
it's like different cultures, and it's because like people will be like, well, there are like Hispanics in Atlanta, and it's like yeah, but they're mostly like Guatemalan or like Salvadorian.
Yeah.
They're not Mexican, you
Yeah.
know?
And in Nebraska, they were mostly Mexican.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
there
that's
was also,
how it is in El Paso because we're right across the border. But yeah, so it's just been something I've noticed, and then I've noticed it a lot, like because again, I didn't really engage with the Black community at all until my first summer, and like you could notice things like where it's like, hey, yeah, maybe there's not a law stopping you from doing this, but also like because most people like in rural Mississippi live on family land.
Mhm.
And so it's like, oh, so you just live on the less developed part of town. Like that's going to have an impact, Or like
Yes.
here in Atlanta, like it's just kind of tough to like also just like not having parents who know what to do in certain instances is a big deal.
Intergenerational. Yeah. Hmm.
Like I've noticed that living with the Hurleys because like their kids are all going to be fine. Like one's going into art and one's going into welding and one's going into STEM and one's going into business, but they're probably all going to be successful because they all understand money management. They all understand like marriage and like how to raise a family and that kind of deal.
And that's because of Steve and Ella.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like
And they
there
know
are
that because they sold books and their parents probably also taught them. And I mean, there's a bunch of reasons, but they know that. But they know that. And so generationally, yeah.
yeah. Whereas like, in another community, like there are issues where it's just like this is something that is still being kind of figured out. It's like a maturation process.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard because like being in Atlanta, you there are problems in every community, but sometimes it feels like you can't acknowledge that there are problems in your community because then it's like you're agreeing with them that the community is like rubbish when it's like no, the community is great, but there are issues in this community the same way there's issues in your community.
Yeah. And this is a neutral statement across the board, whether that's towards black people, brown people,
Yeah.
racist people, white people, right? It's as follows. And this is I took this from like a conglomeration, this opinion or this philosophy from a group of different comedians. But one of the questions that I heard asked, and I was like, this is probably the what makes sense. But okay, if you pick 100 people from the general population,
Mhm.
what are the odds that at least one of those 100 is a total fucking idiot? 100%. 100% is the possibility that at least one person out of 100 is a total dumbass,
Idiot. Yeah.
right? Okay, which means that if you have communities, whether they be black, white, gay, straight, orange, purple, white, racist, whatever, the odds of in that community has more than 100 people.
Yeah.
Odds are at least one of those people is a fucking idiot, which means that black people, brown people, white people, all of us, every community that you want to group people by, a Southwestern alumni, whatever you want,
Mhm.
are all idiots. Or at least there's one. We've had 200 episodes, which means we've had at least
Two
two
idiots.
idiots. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, feel
And
free to name them, Andres.
yeah. And one of them's my brother, and the other one's me.
Gotcha. There you go.
But my point is, like, because that it's actually probably more than at least one person is an idiot out of those 100, but minimum one, right? So if you have a bunch of white people, the odds of one of them being a total idiot is high, which is
Yeah.
probably why you have racist people. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so it's not a white thing or black thing or brown thing. It's a people thing.
Mhm.
So naturally speaking, out of the Hispanics you meet, you're gonna meet some that are not so nice, and
Mhm.
you're gonna meet some that are fucking amazing, like really. And then the average is gonna be somewhere in the middle, right? And so, like you're saying, just because you met the idiot of that representation does not mean we're all idiots. Although unfortunately, that guy's a big idiot, you know.
Yeah.
So it makes us all look bad, but that's how it works.
Yeah.
That's how I
Exactly.
think it works.
No, yeah. I mean, I think you're on the money with just like, the and those idiots, cause problems that bleed through generations.
Absolutely, because
I think
idiots make idiots,
yeah,
and they're multiplying by the dozens.
exactly. And so it's kind of like with my family, for example. Like I think a legitimate problem in at least the Mexican community in El Paso is there's a really high divorce rate, and there's a lot of dads that just aren't super present in their kids' life, like let's say
Mm.
emotionally, right? Um, and so like my dad was never super emotionally sound, right? But it's kind of hard to blame him because his parents weren't super emotionally sound. And so it's taken a lot of time to get to someone. And I'm emotionally like not great. Like there are a lot of things that I am working through. I think the only difference is I now have the opportunity to work through a lot of the stuff that
Yeah,
like my dad wasn't able to work through.
yeah.
And so it takes time, and I
Well,
think that's something to like acknowledge is like generational stuff exists.
yeah, and that's how evolution happens. Like we're used to thinking of evolution from a genetic standpoint, right? But it's also like a philosophical and generational standpoint. And what I mean by that is like mutations, right? Is how we evolve. We develop thumbs because that was a mutation in our DNA that forced us to have that because we evolved from like whatever species before us. But the way it happens is there's a there's a normal and then a mutation happens, and this mutation is actually really positive, and so helps us survive, and so we produce it more and more, which is why we got thumbs. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? In the same way, you selling books was a mutation in the history of your family, right? If you hadn't maybe done that, nothing's saying that you necessarily were going to be like your dad and your dad's dad, but something happened to you that changed your perspective on how things can work, and so then now your kids are better off for it, and so that's the mutation that happened in your family that going forward is going to change the generational direction of your entire lineage. You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like your
yeah,
dad never had the opportunity to sell books for whatever reason, right? But you did.
yeah,
And so now you're going to have kids and they're going to learn from the things that you learned selling books or from your experience living with the Hurleys or whatever. And that ultimately is what eventually ends up happening ideally to everybody. And that's how generations of families evolve, in my opinion. But that's amazing that it happened to you
yeah,
because you get to be the one that like is the arc or the turn in the right direction for your entire family history,
yeah,
you know. And
yeah,
somebody else did it up above you, sure too, but you're a major turn, which is a really
yeah.
cool place to be.
It is fun, and but I think it's like a difficult thing too because it's like you are like the start of the heritage, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And there's like a lot of pressure there, and part of it is because you don't have much to look back to. So like, it's interesting because the Hurleys, they have this like claim to the South, like they have family going back. They have a family Bible that's super old and like lineage and stuff. And then I'm like, there's me, my dad, and my grandpa, and I don't know anything past that. And it's just so something I've been doing is like trying to establish, it's like, okay, if I don't have, well, there's two parts to this. One, it's like, if I don't have this super long heritage, I'm going to be the one to establish this,
Hmm.
our traditions and all this stuff. The other part of it is, um, I guess so. I'm very religious, so that's going to probably play a huge role in this conversation. But a big part of the peace I found in a lot of this is like the Bible. Pro, it provides you a heritage to look back to, if that makes
Mm,
sense.
that's beautiful.
Like even if you know I only know back to my grandfather, I can go all the way back to Adam and Abraham and Moses and so on. Yeah, at least
Yeah.
in the not to say that I'm a direct descendant of Abraham, but in the family of God and the story of God, I am a direct line from
Yeah,
them. So that's kind of
absolutely.
the concept there. But yeah, so that's been super helpful. Um,
That's
in that,
beautiful.
yeah,
Because there's a Christian who we don't know of who was a missionary in like 1100, right? Who carried that legacy, and you're just part of that, and that's really cool. That's a beautiful mission and a beautiful way to attach yourself to history, I think. And I share that with you. My that's why I wrote the book that I wrote, because my parents, like growing up in Nebraska, we didn't have that many people. Like I would go to talk to my Mexican friends and be like, "Hey, how did you end up in the United States? Like, how'd your family?" Right? And they'd be like, "I don't know. My grandpa came when he was a kid, but I don't know why. Nothing." And in my head, I'm like, "No way! If someone asks my great great grandkids why the Gamboas ended up in the United States, that they're not gonna know. Like, if it's up to me to tell that story, then I'm gonna tell that story. But somebody's gonna tell it, and nobody else is going to. And I can't trust someone to do it in the future.
yeah.
So I'm gonna tell it, and it'll be remembered. Somebody asked me one time, "Do you remember your great great grandpa's name?" And I was like, "No." He goes, "No, because he didn't leave you any money." I'm like, that's interesting. But that's the same idea with legacy, not just
Yeah,
money. It's like you don't remember your great 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 grandfather, generally speaking, because they didn't they didn't want they didn't intentionally leave something behind like that. So
yeah,
interesting conversation. This I
yeah.
appreciate you sharing this, man. Congrats, and
Heritage. Thank
to your
you.
grandpa.
Yeah, heritage is important. I think as I think there's different things. I think so I've gone through a lot of stuff which we'll get into, but um, I think as I've gotten older, which is funny because I'm 20, like I can't even buy a beer. Um, as I've gotten older, I think something I've realized is just the importance of family. Like I saw this thing the other day. It's like the only person who remembers what time you got home from work is your kids. Like your kids are your legacy. Your kids are the only thing that matters. The family is the only thing that matters. Like everything else you do matters to an extent, but the best person who can tell you about who you were as a person is your kids. Um, because like and I think about this with like my own family. Like my parents are like very charismatic people. People love them. Um, and I think about this as a way to kind of check myself too. Is like at the end of the day, though, the person that I spend the most time with, or who sees me in the most intimate form, who's typically like my wife or my kids, is going to be the person who actually knows the type of person I am. You know,
Yep.
not the people who see you at work, or even people who tell you you're great at work, because their investment in you as a person and who you actually are as a person to your core is very small compared to your family. And so I think that's
Yeah.
probably a better determiner of like, what does your family say about you? That's probably a better measure of who you are. Cause like I can tell Dan Moore, he's the best person ever all day, but the only person it really matters in the end who thinks Dan Moore is great is Maria and his kids.
Yeah. Or that whose opinion count the most, I guess, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I wrote this down somewhere where I hope I can find it. It was like and it was a quote by somebody I knew, and it was like, what do you want to bring, what do you want to earn the most? Um, and it was like to be remembered by the people who I spend the most time with, and like to earn the respect of the people who I spend the most time with, typically your family. Um, but anyway, we'll come back to that. Anyway, I had a question for you on this topic
Yeah.
that you noticed from growing up in El Paso. How do you? Okay, this is let me explain where I'm coming from with this, because it really blew my mind that not everybody thought this way, which is a very ignorant thing to say, but that's why we grow. Um, and it was when they did the census in 2020. I was it was like the first time I got to count myself as like a U.S. citizen. in a census because they only do it every 10 years.
Yeah.
And so I took it seriously. And so I sat down, and the guy was going door to door. So again, another soft spot. I was like, "Hey, you want something to drink? You want to come in?" He's like, "Oh, sure." So whatever. So uh, we were sitting there, and we were going through the questions, and they asked me, "What race are you?" And I said, "I'm Hispanic." And he goes, "Uh." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, and he just hands me the clipboard. He goes, "Can you fill this out?" And there was no Hispanic on the race. It
Yeah.
was
It's just,
just
right.
it was white, Native American / Indian or whatever, black, Asian, and then I think that was it, and then other. And so I was like other, and then I wrote Hispanic. But then there was a question about ethnicity, and it was like, do you consider yourself Hispanic, Latino? And I put yes, and it bothered me that like brown wasn't a race, or like Hispanic, I guess, wasn't a race. It's an ethnicity. But then I started doing some research on this. This is trippy. And it was something like, I should probably get back to reading this again. But it was like, so Hispanics, we have black people and we have white people. Like if you looked at someone on like Edgar, for example, he's more fair skin, right? And he's got the blue eyes. So if he wanted to, he could come off, and nobody would know, right? When they would hear him say "common vision," but nobody would go, like, what the hell? But generally speaking, you know what I'm trying to say? Like he
Yeah.
looks, my grandma, she looks white.
Mhm.
I am definitely brown. And then there's like black Colombians or black Mexicans.
Mhm.
And so how do the people in El Paso identify? Because what I have found is that some people don't who consider themselves black don't consider themselves Hispanic. They just identify with just black. But then there's other people who are like white who don't consider themselves Hispanic. Some who are like they look like me and they consider themselves white because that's the race, but they're Hispanic. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think it's a race. There was like
Yeah.
a 6-way split, is what I learned. Well, how
Yeah.
do the people in El Paso figure that, or like in your culture that you grew up in? Like, what do you consider yourself, I guess, or what would you say? Does that make sense? How
That's
does that?
interesting. Yeah. No. It is an interesting question because, like, I mean, it's interesting because like most of them wouldn't even call themselves like if you ask like, oh, like what are you? Most of them would say Mexican because
Because
they're
of their
like,
country. Because their
yeah,
nationality, they identify as Mexican.
yeah.
But
Uh,
race-wise, if you ask them, I don't even know.
Yeah, so I think I've only switched up to Hispanic like recently because I'm meeting other Hispanics who are not Mexican, and so like I'm just it's like
Yeah.
I'm like this is kind of crazy. Like there's a couple Colombians in Southwestern, and you're like okay, like whatever, like, um, but then like I'm in like being in the South, like I'm not sure if someone is Mexican. Like they could be from a totally
Cuban.
other
Yeah.
Hispanic country,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I mean I always put Hispanic on the thing, but it was interesting too because like I mean we're kids and we're like wait, but like I'm not white. Why do I have to put white and then Hispanic?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense. Um, and I just don't. I don't know. I don't know if people cared that much, but it was interesting because like so I had one friend in like middle school who his mom was black, but she was Hispanic. She only spoke Spanish. Um, and I guess the term is like Afro Latino, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but he considered, which is, I don't know, it's so interesting because so his dad was like brown and his mom was black, and he considered himself mixed, which is interesting because technically he's just Hispanic because both of his parents are Hispanic.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
could,
exactly. That's the kind of thing where I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? Or like
yeah,
my kids. My kids are good. My wife's white. She's
okay,
Norwegian. So it's like, but my kids are going to be Hispanic for sure.
yeah,
Like, right.
same here, yeah. Like my
And
girlfriend is white, and I'm pretty sure our kids are going to be pretty brown, you
there's
know.
no way. There was, I think it was Chris Rock who had this bit when he was like talking about how black people, he was saying, he's like, oh, sometimes black people get mad at people, other black people for meeting white people. But let me ask you something. If, I don't know, maybe it wasn't Chris Rock, but he's like, he goes, let me, if I have, he's black. He's like, let me ask
Yeah,
you, if I have sex with a white lady and we have a baby, what color is that baby? Definitely not. And the whole crowd's like, white. He goes, exactly. It's a
I've
2 for
seen
1.
this special. Yeah,
We're taking one of them and putting 2 of ours or something like that. But
yeah.
that's a trip right there. So I don't even know.
No, yeah, it is a weird thing, and it's funny because I only started thinking about this stuff like recently, because my
Like into
whole, I
your
mean,
20s.
most of yeah, most of my life, I didn't even, it wasn't even like a question. It was so like, not in my
Yeah.
home. And then even like in college, like it was interesting going for the summer, but it's only 3 months where you're interacting with these different demographics. Because I went to school in San Antonio, and San Antonio is a lot more mixed than El Paso. Like San Antonio is probably like equal parts Hispanic, white. There's a small population of Black people, and then there's like a pretty decent Asian population. But everyone's pretty integrated, and the city has a huge Hispanic influence.
I mean, it's called San Antonio.
Yeah,
Let's see.
it was. I mean, like you could get great food anywhere.
65%, 65% Hispanic. That's what
Wow.
it's saying.
Yeah. So it's crazy. So yeah. So like even there, I started to notice it a little bit because I was hanging out in my Christian circles that I hung out in were very like white, um, because most Hispanics are Catholic, and so
Yes.
that was an interesting kind of. That was the first time where I'm like, man, like white people eat like really bland food sometimes. Like that was my first experience with that because my whole life I like didn't get that
The
either. I
fuck
was like,
is sweet potato?
yeah, well, it was because like they would have like taco nights, and the tacos were not tacos, and I was
They
like,
were they
what are we?
were they were Wacos, white tacos.
Yeah,
That's what they call it, Waco, Texas. Okay. So get this. So this is super interesting. And you were more correct than you thought you were, but in a weird way. Okay. It's saying that in San Antonio, race and Hispanic origin. So white alone percentage or people who identify as white only
hmm
is 64%. But then people who identify as Hispanic or Latino is 65%. Now I know I went to school for math.
yeah,
So
but that
percentage wise, something's wrong.
yeah,
So what the hell is that? So that means that there's probably some Hispanic people who wrote down Hispanic but think they're only white and they're not the same thing.
yeah,
Do you see what I'm saying? So out of those white alone people, some of them are Hispanic, but they don't consider that a race, and so they're saying I'm white only, but I'm also ethnically Hispanic,
yeah.
which
Which I
makes
think is
sense.
normally what I fill out on those forms because I think it's like the thing that makes the most. That's what we were
Oh,
trying to do. And so, like in elementary school, when we were filling out forms and we would ask questions, that's what they would tell us to do: is put white and then put Hispanic.
the
So
teachers told you that?
yeah,
That's
like that was
crazy.
we would ask. We were like, "What do we put?" And they're just like, "Just put white and then put Hispanic." They're like, "You're white," and we're like,
How
"Okay."
much? Think about the kind of difference that makes for how much funding your school makes.
Yeah. Oh my
Because
god.
they're like 65% white, even though it's like 90% Hispanic, which is not white. I don't know if people can disagree. I don't know, man.
Wow.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what we always filled out. Yeah.
because when I fill it out, I'm like, someone asks, "Are you white?" And I'm like, "Nope, hell no, I'm not white." And but the thing is, like, governmentally, there is a distinction. Most people don't know this, but I know this. But black people were allowed to vote in 1964. I mean, they were allowed to vote earlier, but you know what I'm saying. The civil rights movement, 1964. Hispanics weren't granted those same rights until 1975, full like almost 10 years later, or more than 10 years later. After, so that means that if after like in 1970, we could have gone to vote or whatever, it would have been the election of 68. We could have gone to vote, and I would have got turned down, but my black friend would have been allowed to go vote,
Yeah.
which is bananas. But because I'm not white,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I'm
Exactly.
saying?
But on the form,
I'm on paper. I'm
yeah,
apparently as white as a paper,
yeah,
but
yeah. No, the form
wow.
is weird. I think. Well, recently in the last so I just started a new position, and all the forms they had Hispanic as part of the race, and so that
That's
was great.
wild, which is great, I think.
Well, it's great because so basically I moved into ministry, and for the ministry that I work with, we have to raise our budgets and our salaries, right? Um, and there's part of our budget goes to the larger organization, right, to make the organization run because it's a nonprofit, and it's like there
Sure.
are administrative costs like legal costs, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Who does our accounting, things like that, and one of the things that you get charged is called a kairos fee, and everyone was like, what is that? And basically it's like you move into ministry. um, Support raising is not that weird in like white Christian communities, but it is very weird in Hispanic and Black communities.
In
And so
fact,
the Kairos fee,
not it's weird in non-American communities. I was just talking to Peter
yeah,
Petcup about this. He goes, in Bulgaria, it's weird when you say raising money for something. People are like, "What the hell do you mean?"
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Right?
yeah,
And so so they made this kind of Kairos fee because that goes to helping like ethnic minorities getting fully funded because they just know it's going to be harder for them to get fully funded. And so it's important that I put down like Hispanic because that means that I can get part of that funding, which is pretty cool. Because like
that
I
is.
mean it's true. Like I mean I think I'm going to be fine in terms of support raising because I've put in so much work the last few years in terms of networking and making connections. But at the same time, it's like I know other people, like the other people that I just did my like sales school, but for ministry thing with, like they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna talk to my family and my family's friends, and I'm like, my family is Catholic. They have no concept of like what going into ministry means.
Yeah.
Like going into ministry is I'm gonna go be a priest and like give
Yep.
up, ever having a wife or kids.
Yeah. That's bananas, dude. That is
Yeah,
so. And here's the deal. I'm glad that the Christian community, or at least your Christian community, recognizes brown as a race because Jesus was brown, bro. Like it or not, dude was born in the Middle East. He did not look like the white, blue-eyed Jesus that you see in Mississippi churches, bro. He was browner than you and I. Like
yeah.
he was brown as can get before
Get
you can
that
get black.
curly hair.
Oh yeah, he definitely had that curly hair. Homie was from like the Middle East,
Yeah,
literally. Like his parents, well, his mom,
yeah.
yeah. And angels have no race, so that's one gene pool, and you know Mary was brown. So
One of my um, one of my favorite sermons I ever heard back home in or not back home, I guess back home in San Antonio because that's where I went to school, um, was this sermon that we did for Easter. So like our pastor was very like willing to challenge what people's preconceived notions were. And Easter is like the day where you're going to get the most people to come to church, right? Because it's all the people who, what is it? It's
you're
Easter
passive
CEO,
Christian.
Christmas and Easter only. And so most churches will, from my experience, will try to be as like open on Easter to just kind of get you in there. But I'm going in, I'm like, I told my friend, I'm like, dude, Drew's about to like challenge some people on like what they believe. And his whole sermon was called The Jesus I Painted. And he's talking about that painting of Jesus that's the most common one in the world. And how it's just like, this is what you imagine Jesus to be like, this clean cut, very like, you're right. He's basically an avatar. It's like you can imprint whatever you want to believe about Jesus onto this. And then there's the real Jesus. And then he showed that kind of like picture where it's like, this is probably what he looked like,
Yeah.
And it was like, this picture is on everyone's mantle. Would you put this guy on your mantle? And then he started talking about how, um, and it became a deeper kind of sermon on how a lot of Christians tend to imprint what they believe about Jesus onto this idea of Jesus, but they don't actually get to know him by reading the Bible and understanding who he really is. Um, and and part of that is because sometimes you don't want to be confronted by what he's telling you.
Oof.
And so he was
Oof.
very big in, like letting you're not going to scripture to shape scripture. You're supposed to go to scripture so that it can shape you. You're
Yeah.
supposed to be encountering like he used to say like every time you go to church, you should come out feeling convicted that you need to change something in your life. Like you shouldn't be going to church being like, yeah, I feel great. I'm doing fantastic in everything I do. Cause it's like you're not. And part of that is like you're never going to because you're not supposed to be. The goal is not perfection. The goal is relationship with Jesus. Um, but there are going to be aspects in your life where you fall short, and it's always a good thing to try and fix those areas. And so when it was very weird selling in the South where that's just not a thing. Like cultural Christianity is pretty huge here. And there are some really solid churches, but there's a lot of churches where it's just like, we're just going to, like, it's become very political. It's like, this is a Republican church or a Democratic church, and the church becomes more about, how does Christianity align with my
Which is
politics
so
versus,
crazy. Which
you
is
know,
so crazy because like the biggest thing that this country did was to like separate church and state.
yeah,
Because in our countries, I mean, at least you're with your Mexican heritage. Like for me in Colombia, the church is not separate from the state. There are, like you said, Catholicism is a thing.
yeah,
That particular flavor of Christian Baskin Robbins, and they are like in power politically. Like the Archbishop of Bogota has direct political influence, the way that the Supreme Court or Congress has here on the things that happen besides Congress and the Supreme Court in Colombia.
yeah,
People don't really recognize that, but that is a thing. And so it's always funny to me when people do their politics based on their faith, because it's like, dude, more than Christians live here, more than Jews. There's
mhm,
Muslims, and they're all American.
yeah,
So it's weird for people to like say that there's a Republican church. That blows my mind. Like,
yeah,
I mean, it doesn't blow my mind. I believe it, but what I'm saying is, it just blows my mind that people think that that's a good thing, or a Democratic or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. The fact that you think political churches are good, it's like, wow, that's interesting.
yeah. Because my politics have like altered a lot in my
Sure.
like in high school was really conservative. Because it was like I was like I don't understand why like I don't get these like liberal things, right? Like I have no concept of the world outside of El Paso, right? I don't recognize that El Paso is this kind of weird anomaly, right? Um, and then as I got older, I keep saying that, and I think it's so silly.
Well, I mean, you're in your
But
20s, so it'll continue to do this. So, but I understand what you're saying.
but I think it's more like when I started to become. So there was at one point where I thought I had my political ideology set. Um, and then since I've become a Christian, my interest in politics has like subsided pretty substantially. And I think a part of it is like my political system that I think is best, which other people are going to think another system is better, right? The system I think is best works in a world where God doesn't exist. But I believe God exists. And if I believe what he's telling me to do scripturally, then most of these political things matter in terms of like in the now, we should probably help people and we should probably like fix some things. But at the end of the day, you give to Caesar what is to Caesar and you give to God what is to God. Like
Amen.
the politics part is not supposed to be the central part of your religion, like if if you believe God exists, then he's going to redeem everything, right? And so the political system we live under is not up to you, it's up to God. And so, you just deal with that and you try to fix things in the present. That doesn't mean you become completely, you don't grow in huge political apathy, but it means that it's just not something that you're supposed to fight over all the time,
Yep.
like where it's just,
And we do so much.
yeah. Or where you like, because I've been in some churches where I'm like, this is interesting, like where they'll like twist scripture to fit the political wave of the day,
Yes.
I'm like, this is
Oh
weird.
man,
Like
it's so weird.
I went to this church and they were talking about, because the death penalty was like a big issue at the time. And it was like, in the Old Testament, this is talking about legal killings, versus illegal killings. And so the death penalty is okay. And it's like this whole argument to justify the death penalty. Um, and then I'm like, well, you could just go to like Matthew 5, where Jesus confronts that whole feeling where it's like, just because you don't kill someone doesn't make you a good person. The root issue is your anger. And so if you feel angry enough to do this death penalty thing or be okay with killings or try to justify killings, that's the problem. The problem isn't killing, it's your anger and where that leads. And so um, Tim Mackey is the
Super
guy from
interesting.
the Bible Project, and he talks about how God takes your sin more seriously than you do. You think killing is bad, but he thinks your anger is worse.
The Bible projects from a town called or for a church called Bridgetown Church.
Yeah. That's like in your backyard, right?
That's where I go to church.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Does he preach there?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I've wanted to make my way out there. I mean, I love. He posted all of his old sermons are like on YouTube, and he has this amazing Matthew series that I just like listen through. It's
It's
like
really good.
35 sermons. Yeah.
Yep. Bible project is cool. Yeah. And again, not to make this episode preachy or political, but we're talking about different things. I commend you for having such a like. I mean, 20-year-olds, most 20-year-olds in America don't have such a good head on the shoulder. So good stuff, dude. I mean, I think that like the way you're thinking is pretty good. I have a good understanding of what you're thinking, and I agree with it pretty well. Even if like I don't know how I don't want to get into this. I don't know how our political views align or not, but I know that the way you think is the way that people need to think because that's what matters, not what we believe about gun laws or whatever. Right? It's like it's the way that you're approaching the problem that is what's going to be better for society overall. And I think that not enough people do that, especially not our Congress, regardless of what side of the aisle it is.
It's a mess, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, and I guess like the reason I maybe seem like I have a good head on my shoulders goes to my second summer, so we could do that transition. Like,
yeah, I was going to say, let's jump into that. But before we do that, hold on. Before we do that, I'm going to do a quick word from some of our sponsors, so that way I can do right by them. Guys, earlier we talked about how you can support our show. Don't skip this part. That supports us a lot. So that way you can spread the word of what cool stuff the alumni are doing, because we only are sponsored by alumni. And so we want to give everybody a good voice. So here are a couple of our friends. We'll talk with Pedro Vega first. Here comes a message from Pedro.
Hey guys, this is Pedro Vega with Cardinal Senior Benefits. Today I'm going to talk about getting paid fast. One of the things that blew me away about this industry is that if I make some good decisions, work really hard on Monday, I can see the fruits of my labor literally within 24 to 48 hours. I wake up, you form the habit of checking your checking account just to see the direct deposits come in day after day after day. And it makes you want to do it again and again and again. So guys, I hope you guys are enjoying the show, and thank you so much for listening.
And now a quick word from Pat Roach. Love you, Pat.
So one of the things that I had to do when first starting the business was figure out how to get a client. That's important. Well, it turns out in real estate, the number one way that people will choose an agent is from a friend's recommendation. So as I started to spread the word about what I was doing as a realtor, guess what happens? All of a sudden my phone rings and it's a friend of a friend who said, "Hey, we heard great things about you. Could you help us buy a house?" That's how we find clients. And who doesn't like finding clients when your phone rings and they're calling you?
Gotta love Pat.
He's a blast. He did the keynotes
Balloon talk
for sales school my third summer.
Yeah, he does the balloon talk.
Yeah.
Like one of our ads says, "Hey, yeah, that's right. Pat Roach, the guy that pops your balloons at sales school." So funny. Guys, if you want more information on working with Pat Roach or working with Cardinal Senior Benefits, make sure you click the link below on the description notes. So wherever you found this episode, you just slide down in the description, and then there's like links if you want to learn more information about their companies and what they're up to and how to get onto their teams. Pretty awesome companies, both of them, to work for. Otherwise, we wouldn't have them on here. Anyway, okay, so back to Andres. So okay, you're talking about your second summer. So let's go into this. Yeah, go 2, 3. And then a little bit of what you're up to now, and then probably some ponytails or something.
Yeah.
We'll see how we're feeling.
Oh man, this is about to be a crazy couple summers to talk about. So, that whole year in between my second summer was super important. So I bought into recruiting pretty hardcore because I had changed a lot after my first summer. I was like, this is a blast. Like, I grew a ton. Like, this is fun. So I bought in pretty heavily into recruiting. And through it, I was trying to be a student of the game. And so, like, I was doing PCs with a bunch of people who had kind of done really well in previous years. So, like, I talked to Weston McKinley. I talked to Jack Wheeler, Emma Barnett, Willie Andrade, that whole gang. And then I talked to Jake Chesney right before the year ended. I mean, it was cool because, like, Jake, all those people are really awesome, and they all kind of talked to me about, like, hey, like, how's your relationship with God? Like, that's important. But then with Jake, Jake was like super awesome. And I think I took him a little more seriously because Jake like already had a family and was already married and was successful at both. And I was like, okay, those other people are really cool, but like Jake is someone that has what I have, you know? And I started talking to him and he was like, yeah, how's your relationship with God? And I was like, okay, like this again, you know, because I grew up Catholic, but that just wasn't a big part of my life at this point. Like I had gone to church in high school with a friend, but I was just never really convicted that that was like a big deal. And then Jake, he put it like, you can't put God in a box. God is the center of your life. And everything that you want to have comes from that. So if you want, he was telling me like, if you want to have the good wife and you want to have the good kids and that good relationship there, and you want to, you know, a career and you want to be provided for, it all comes from your relationship with God. So if you want to have those things, maybe you should consider, you know, deep diving. And he, like any good sales manager, you know, he was like, hey, like it's about to be the new year. You want to make it like your resolution. So my resolution was to do that. I was like, my resolution was figure out Jesus. That was like what I called it. And then, so I bought like a Bible, and my plan, because again, I had like no concept of this, was just like to read Genesis forward, which is not super helpful. And so like I struggled pretty hardcore, and like I almost gave up by like week 2. And then, but what happened was, so we go to GRS, and I don't know if you know the Hartmans at all.
Nicole and Gabby?
No, you know Mitchell?
Oh, no. This is a different Hartmans.
Yeah, maybe. So I thought you said Mitchell. That's Mitchell is like Massey, Mitchell Massey. Mason Massey is married to Victoria Hartman, who sold a bunch of years. And her little sister, Charlotte, is still currently selling. She's an OL right now. But we sold the same first summer. And I had met Charlotte at Sizzler. So this is GRS. And not, I guess, to expose myself a little bit, we were having an after party, and still 17-year-old Andres was like getting a little wasted in one of the hotel rooms.
Hey, sure. It's all good.
And Charlotte was there, and I like knew she was a Christian, and so I was like, Charlotte, like I'm trying to read the Bible. Can you help me figure it out? And I'm like, I'm pretty drunk at this point, and I think she was completely sober. So like, but it ended up being pretty cool because she was going on a study abroad to Jordan, like other side of the world, and so we did WhatsApp messages, and she just walked me through the book of John, like that whole semester. And it took a while. Like it took until like March for me to be like, I think I get this, you know? The first 2 months, like she was super patient. I asked like the dumbest questions. It just like totally didn't matter. I was like, was trying to, you know, figure it out. And then going into my second summer, I was like, okay, my theme for my second summer is like, how close can I get to God? And that was kind of the idea. And he just kind of like answered. So my host family, my second summer, was an alumni who had become a pastor. And so every day, you know.
Where were you selling? You said in Georgia this time? Florida.
Okay. So this was like just north of Tampa.
Okay.
So I sold in Zephyr Hills where they like bottle all the water. And it was fun. But yeah, he was my HQ, you know, host family, and he was a pastor, and him and his wife met, you know, after he sold, I think after his first summer or something like that. But yeah, it was just really cool. And so that was a big part of the summer, just doing Bible studies with him. And then I decided to get baptized because I got baptized as a baby. But at the time I was like, I want to get baptized where I'm like cognitive of it all. So he baptizes me, and then immediately after that, I get like incredibly sick and my summer just kind of ends. So I get baptized. The next week, I do a 92-hour work week, which was like I was trying to push myself. And then I got incredibly sick and was just like I couldn't move, and it was just like awful. Because it happened on like a Tuesday. So like Tuesday, I go work. I start feeling sick. I leave a house, and I feel like I'm gonna pass out while I'm driving. So I like pull over into a parking lot, and I just like knock out, and I wake up like 6 hours later. So like just imagine like, and I'm worried about my schedule, so I'm like, I'm trying to hit my 30 demos and I like wake up and it's 6 hours, it's the afternoon now, and I was like freaking out. I'm like, how am I gonna hit my 30 demos? But I wake up and my nose is bleeding, and so my parents are nurses, so I called my mom and I was like, hey, my nose is bleeding, like I don't feel good, like what do I do? And she was like, go check your blood pressure. And my blood pressure is like through the roof. And so I get doctors and stuff. And I stayed on the field. I refused to leave. So I stayed on the field for like 3 or 4 more weeks, just being like ridiculously sick. Like I couldn't get up most mornings. I would follow, and families would be asking like, is he okay? Because I would be on the couch there like looking decrepit,
Shit.
and it just wasn't good. But I was like super stubborn because I was seeing a doctor, but the doctor was like, you're probably just tired, man. And I was like, I've worked the 80 hours before, like I don't think it's because I'm tired, like I think there's like something seriously wrong. And I was having chest pains, and it was just kind of this like crazy thing. And then Virgie, who is amazing, I can't believe we haven't mentioned Virgie,
I
like
love Virgie.
most brilliant woman on the planet. She calls me, and we're trying to figure out if I can do deliveries because deliveries are coming up. And I'm like, yeah, like I think I can do it. And I'm like out of breath just talking to her because my heart hurts so much. And she just tells me like, hey, I canceled your book shipment. Like, go home and get better. Because I got asked to come back after my like 92-hour work week. Because I was like with it, I was down for the cause. And I was like worried. I was like, I'm not going to be able to come back if I leave now. Like, I'm going to be a quitter. And Virgie was just like very sound with it. And she was just like, hey, you want to come back, right? Like, you can't come back if you're dead. And I was like, damn, okay, And
Yeah, you're not Jesus.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought I was invincible, but like, no. And so I go back home, and cause my parents are nurses, they like know they could pull some strings to like get me through to doctors faster. And I got like all the tests I needed within like 2 days of being home. And they diagnosed me. So I had pericarditis, which it's like a random viral infection of the heart, and is like pretty dangerous. And like, if you've heard about it, it's because it's come up with the whole like vaccine conversation,
Mm-hmm.
like with young guys who are relatively healthy, it tends to be an issue.
Yeah, I have had open heart surgery, so I know a little bit. I'm like, oh, I knew this.
Yeah. So
Inflammation of the heart in
yeah,
general.
the pericardium, like
Yeah.
around it. Yeah. And so there's like different, I mean, there's like, we don't have to get into it, but there's like debate on whether it's like a vaccine thing or not.
Did you get vaccinated?
Yeah, like right before. So that's where it's like kind of a part of the story. And my parents forced me to get vaccinated, and so that caused some conflict. It was like
Sorry.
yeah, my dad forced me to get vaccinated. I get sick. My doctors who are his friends tell me that it's probably the vaccine, and my dad just like wasn't gonna have it because he felt really bad.
Okay. Sorry, if you mentioned that you got vaccinated, it glitched out for me, so I was trying to figure out what was going on. But that's why if you mentioned it, I asked because I wasn't sure if you mentioned it. You glitched out on me for a while, for like a little on my side. So sorry about that if I repeated asked you something that you mentioned. But we're back now, so we're good. Sorry.
Yeah. So it was just a whole thing, and like, I mean, the truth is, like, you really can't be sure. Like, if you're someone who believes that the vaccine causes that, there's a solid argument. And then if there's not, you also have a valid argument, because technically anything can cause pericarditis. Like, the cause of pericarditis is unknown 99% of the time, because it's literally a random thing that happens. And so,
So it could have been anything.
yeah, could have been
We'll leave it at
anything.
that before we get flagged by Spotify for
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Or by somebody.
But yeah, and my doctors tell me, like, if I had waited one more week, like, I would have died, because I was pushing it, man. Like, I kept trying to work, I was just like, I'm gonna do this, and which is not a super great way. And I don't think this is like Southwestern's fault or anything, because you take responsibility for where you're at. But I just think, like, I was so bought into the, like, you don't want to be a quitter thing, like, you got to work the schedule, that it just, like, hurt, to leave. And that's why I'm really grateful for Virgie, because I don't know how much you know of Virgie. She probably has talked about this when you were selling books, but she went through serious health things. And so she's always been really great about keeping perspective on that. Because I think if you haven't experienced really serious health things, you don't realize how much it affects you. And so sometimes, like, even in Southwestern, talking to some people and the way they react to you not working because of a health issue, you can tell who's had health issues and who hasn't.
It's so fucking frustrating. I mean,
Yeah.
this is, if I had, like, I mean, we don't never normally get super nag here about Southwestern, but there are a couple bones we've picked with, or that we've, like, pointed out, and that is absolutely one of them, what you just mentioned. It's just like, dude, just because you had a great perfect for summer and you didn't have any car problems and you didn't really, maybe you got a little sick, but you didn't get sick, and you never had PR issues, or you never had, like, everything, you had, your HQ is perfect. You don't have to walk. It's not until you have to do that you're like, oh, like, I get it. I get it. Because I got sick on the book field. I mean, I was hospitalized for a couple days. So when you're talking about that, I'm like, I understand what you're talking about. Like, I don't blame you for being off schedule or whatever, because it's like, you were just, when you're sick like that, like sick, the number one thing you want to do is not be sick. And then from there, if you had that, then you start feeling guilty about all the other things, but it's not your fault,
Sometimes people view it as like, oh, like, you're sick because you want to stay home, is like the vibe. And it's like, no, I wish I could go work. Like, that's way better than not feeling this, like, I feel awful right now.
Yeah. And then they give you this bullshit of like, well, Michael Jordan was sick with the flu game and he's still hitting 90 points. And they hit you with these allegories and metaphors and other connection. And you're like, it's not the same thing, dude. It's like, not the same thing.
It's like, I literally feel like there's a truck on top of me. Like, I can't move right now.
It's not. I've lost 10 pounds in the last 7 days, which is not normal. Like, you can't fake that stat. It's not like, oh, like.
So yeah, it was awful. And I got so depressed. And I think I mean, it was bad, man. Like, so I flew to Nashville because I wanted to go to check in with everybody, because I was like, I worked so hard. And by the way, I was, like, told not to fly on a plane. But I was just so upset, and it was, like, really dark, like, it was like, at check-in, like, I remember being, man, I must have been such a pain to the people around me, because I was taking, like, 15 different meds, like that kind of deal, where you're just, like, taking tons of pills, and, like, you're not supposed to drink with them, but I was like, I earned this. And, like, my org was, like, forcing me not to drink, because they're like, dude, you're on meds, like, you can't do this. And it was just, I was, like, so depressed. And then eventually, so it was funny, because, like, at this point, I'm pretty early days, I guess, like, devout Christian, if that makes sense. Like, I had gotten baptized and then immediately gotten sick, and, like, by the time check-in rolled around, I was, like, pretty not with the cause for Jesus. I was like, this sucks. And my cousin, on the way back from Nashville, the one that I had And by the way, she had way more of a successful Southwestern career than I did, if that makes sense. Like, she was number 20. She was top 20 her first summer. Second summer, like, hit gross. This last summer did, like, I don't know, 6,000 units or something. Like, was just a baller, you know. She I never had the sales she had, but she was just like a hustler, man. And but we have a conversation on the way back from check-in in Nashville, and I'm just complaining about like what I'm dealing with, and she just like reality checked me. She's like, "Hey, I thought you like were a Christian. Like, don't you believe in God? Like, aren't you supposed to have faith or something?" And I was like, "Oh, wow, okay."
Called you out.
Yeah, she called me out, and I stayed quiet. Like in the moment, I like acted mad, but like that hit to the core, and like I still remember that. And so as soon as I got back to San Antonio, like I got plugged in, and that whole semester was like super formative after my second summer, because there were points where like I just didn't know if I was gonna make it. Like you go to bed and your heart is just pounding so hard. You're like, I might not wake up. Like, I don't know. And you kind of come to peace with that. And, that experience has definitely shaped where I'm at now. Cause it was just like, there's not a huge portion of the population who knows what it's like to be near death and then to like accept it and then to have to live on, which was like a whole thing, because eventually, I find out I'm going to get better. And I had a talk with Virgie the next GRS, because I was like, Virgie, like, I kind of miss being sick. Like, I miss the clarity of like being that sick, of like being near death, if that makes sense. Because when you get there and you accept it, it's kind of like euphoric, like you're like, well, like, I'm happy and nothing matters and all I care about are the things that matter, and like I'm gonna be super nice to people. And it's really easy to do that because you're like, I don't know if I have tomorrow, and then you get better and you're like, oh man, like there are consequences to living.
Tomorrow. Yeah.
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 And,
I get it. I get it. I found out my life expectancy. I don't have the time to prove this on the air or anything, but just my life expectancy is between 55 and 65.
Wow.
Statistically, based on my heart issues and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that out when I was 25 years old. And I was like, okay, so I'm either about halfway through a really fucking awesome life or a third of the way of a really shitty one. Yeah. And I'd rather, like, I accepted that death in the in my head. I'm like, I could die. Like, if I got stabbed and killed right now, I'd be like, okay. Now there's things I want to do before I die, but I'd be okay. So whenever it doesn't happen every day, but whenever I think about it like that, I get that euphoria of like, no, it's fine. Yeah. And it's such a weird way to experience life. I think, but
it's weird.
Like, I could die any day.
Oh man, I totally get what you're saying. Where it's like at the same time you're content, but you also kind of have a sense of urgency, Yeah. This has created some conflict in my life because it's like, I think I'm like, why are we wasting time? Like, let's just do this. Like, I don't understand, like, why you're just, like, it's weird because sometimes I really appreciate just sitting around and doing nothing. But then there's other times where I'm like, why are we waiting for, like, for, just, like, this is, not to say that this is how I operate, but like the Christian, kind of cliche of like those kids who meet and then get married after like a couple months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I grew up, I grew up in a environment where people dated for like, 5 years, then got married, that whole deal. And then after this whole stuff with my heart, I'm like, I kind of get the people who get married really quickly. Like, like, why are you wasting time? And not to say I operate that way. Because I think some people think I do, and I have a longer timeline than a couple months, but yeah, that's the vibe. Yeah,
it's funny because like there's some things that you do need to take time with, and it's okay too. But those same things, sometimes it's okay if you don't take time with, and you just go. I mean, it's just a different way to do it. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I think people always be like, the right way to do it is to make sure you know each other and that you blah blah blah. And you're like, I mean, that's a way to do it. There's cases for people who have made it that way or who have gotten divorced that way, and there's people, then there's cases for people who literally met one day and the next day they were married. There's marriage. I mean, we've met them on the book field. I've met couples where it's like, how long did you guys know each other? And they're like, oh, we met over a weekend, and then we got married and eloped, and we've been married for 60 years. And you're like, huh. And
cool.
Statistics and stuff, yeah, I get that, and there's value in them, but also there's, again, kind of like the one idiot, right? It's like there's going to be some percentage of that makes it or that does this or that, and just you can be one of them. There's nothing that says you can't be one of those, right? So might as well just make it work the way you want to make it work, and then deal with it as it comes. But just movement is key, like you said. Just do something.
Yeah, I think just being man. Oh, someone So, someone was saying like Jesus. This was an analogy I got back in like October because I was trying to contemplate whether I was going to stay in Southwestern or if I was going to move towards ministry. So I was talking to this guy who was in ministry, and he told me, Jesus is going to steer, your wheel wherever he wants you to go, but he can't steer a parked car. Like he can't do anything if you're not doing anything. You have to move.
Yep.
And
so, you get to pick the gas.
Yeah.
Or the brake.
Yeah.
He only has his hands on the wheel. I mean, you got your hands on the gas pedal.
Yeah, he
So,
can't force you to go do things, but
yeah.
So that's been an interesting thing.
So why did you decide to go back to your third summer? Because you were saying that there was a formative experience in the fall of after your second summer, but then why 3?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So I actually looked for jobs after my second summer, and I actually found some pretty cool jobs, and I got like a job offer. But I was like, there was just a feeling that I needed to. I had unfinished business, whereas like I don't want to go out that way. Like I need to go back, and so, and the way I thought about it was like, if I do this, I'm going to bring out a team. So I had recruited really hard the year before. So I had like 8 PSLs or like 8 people recruited over the year. But then they all went cold literally like 2 days before sales school. It was rough. They all called me like the same day because they had talked to each other, and they just like in unison were calling me like going cold.
Nice.
And it was rough. Yeah.
Brutal as shit, dude.
Yeah.
Of the things that have happened to you, I don't know if this is in the top 3 or top 5, but it's in one of them. Like that's brutal.
It was not fun. I was like, okay. And part of that is because I was a senior in high school. So I was recruiting other seniors. And like, I remember their excuses were so ridiculous because they'd be like,
that's right. Because you weren't going back to college, bro. You're going back to high school. Oh my God. After your first one, you went back to high school.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord. I forgot to think about it that way.
Because you go back and you're like, what am I doing here? Like, luckily it was during COVID, so it was online.
But still, you were like, before your third summer, you graduated high school.
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, it was weird, man. So, so I most of the people I was recruiting were like high school students, and they just were like, no, like at like a couple days before, they were like, my mom said no, and I'm like, I know your mom didn't say no because I did the parent work, and your mom wants you to get out of the house, like.
So wild.
So they went cold, and so I was like, I'm gonna build a team going into my third summer, and at this point, my relationship with God was like stronger, and so. Because this was I made this decision after my cousin kind of called me out, and I like had time to like go to church and process and build a community around me at UTSA. And so like people were just I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I feel like this is just where God's moving me, and I need to build a team. But I didn't want to do it for the Southwestern reason, if that makes sense. Like I didn't want to do it just because it's like cool team, I was like, I want to learn how to have friends come out with me and be able to like actually impact them. So I'm like, I don't care how well this team does. Like, I just want to build a cool team. So I recruit pretty hard. And then I was doing well in recruiting. I think I had 3 people by GRS in January. And that was when I was like, okay, maybe I should think about my team doing well. Because me and Danny Johnston kind of track this. He works with Thinking Ahead now, but we were like, the way things are going, like the number 1 team in the world is going to be an in-school team. And so I was like, I wholeheartedly believe that, and I think my team could be that team, you know? So in January, I started moving in that direction where I was like, okay, I think my team could be a top team. Like, there's some really sharp kids here. So by the time I got to sales school, I had 5 at sales school, which was like huge success compared to the year before. So I had 5 at sales.
13-point swing.
Yeah. And I got to go to the President's Club dinner with Dan Moore, and that was fun. And I just felt like a stud there. Like, half the org were my kids, and it was like cool, you know, and very different than I expected. And I think this was a big lesson in like sometimes God gives you what you want, but he gives it to you in a way that's better than you wanted. But you just like didn't realize it. So like I wanted a team of 5 Christian dudes. Like that was kind of the vibe I was going for. And so I ended up with a team of 1 Christian guy who's a buddy of mine and 4 very much non-Christian girls from back home who were like the 4 girls I called in my recruiting cycle. Like there was like, you know, probably 10 girls I reached out to out of the like over 100 people I infoed, and they were like the ones who ended up on my team. And so, but it ended up being huge because I think it was really impactful, and I was not a perfect leader at all. You know, we all have our like shortcomings, and I realized like, man, I got a lot of work to do before I become a dad. Because like, if these were my kids, I would have messed them up for sure. You know, like you know, I have a problem with like keeping up with people consistently. And so if they're listening to this, I mean, they can attest to this. Like, I do a horrible job of like maintaining the relationship because I just kind of like go underground and I just like won't text people back. Like I think I literally have over 80 missed messages on my phone right now.
No, you're one of those people.
I'm one of those people. My girlfriend hates it. She went through I had 60 unheard voicemails. And so my girlfriend went through all of them and was like yelling at me. She's like, you have all these voicemails that people send you, and you're just like, no. So yeah, it's rough, and that actually happened after the stuff with my heart because I was just like, I don't care, like it's okay.
Fair enough.
So, but it's a bad habit I've developed because I don't have a heart thing anymore, and I should probably reach back out to people who reach out to me. And so,
yeah, bro.
That's an issue. But yeah, so that, but they were a great team, and so we ended up being the number 3 in school team. They did about 7,500 units as a team, which is fun. And 4 finished the summer. So that was an interesting story. So the one kid who didn't finish was actually the Christian kid who was like my best friend. And so like we'll call him Mort. But that one was a huge lesson in terms of how I operated, because kind of like, so he was the one who was doing the best on my team actually. So he left week 8 of the summer. And he was the number 15 first year at the time when he left. And he was like half of my team's units. And so I was terrified when he left. But what I realized, so like he started out the gate strong and like never dipped. But the second week of his summer, he had like a really serious thing happen in his family. And he didn't quit. And so me and like my OL were just kind of like, I think he's fine. Like, I think, you know, like he's going to be okay. He didn't quit. We thought he would quit because it's like a really big thing that happened in his family. but his attitude was just kind of awful after that. Like, it just kind of killed his momentum. And I was not gracious, like, whatsoever. Like, I was just like, dude, you got to work harder. Like, you got to, because he would, like, have the results, but, like, he would, you know, his demos would dip and stuff. And I was just like, dude, you got to go kill it. And it was hard because, so the number 1 and 2 teams were also in the Visionaries. And a lot of those guys he had become friends with. And so, you know, this was super unwise, but I was like, dude, like, you know, Jesus is killing it, man. Like, you got to go, push it. And he just kind of had enough, and he left, and there was just nothing any of us could do. And, you know, it was interesting because, like, and I was I think I was pretty angry at the time. And other people were like, dude, that's kind of ridiculous for him to leave. But looking back, so when I got back to school, one of my mentors in ministry, I talked through the summer with him, and his brother had sold books, and so he kind of knew a little bit about it. And we were talking through it, and he's like, dude, like, Mort, how's Mort doing? Because, like, I didn't even tell him that I was, like, angry with him or anything, but he's like, how's he doing? Like, that was a really serious thing that happened with his family. And I was like, oh my God, like, I'm not taking, like, I dealt with all this stuff where people weren't super gracious to me with my health issues. And, like, I am not being gracious to this kid who went through something that was, like, truly traumatic with his family. And I was just like, you just got to go to work. And so it just taught me a lot. And, you know, I felt really bad. I was just like, man, I just wasn't, like, it was a leadership lesson. But it actually kind of, I mean, it helped me because it was like a wake-up call, because up until then I had just kind of been coaching him on my team, and then when he left I was like, I need the rest of my people to produce. And so I actually started coaching them, and it went well. So I would send them, like, voice notes every night coaching them. I would send them a pump-up message every morning. Like, I would coach them individually on top of their stat calls. And they, like, all start, like, one girl, she's came back, and she's in South Carolina right now, crushing it. She ended up being the top kid on my team. She was number 15. That's where she finished in the Superstar book. Like, little stud. She went from, like, 100 units a week to, like, but her top week was like 450, and it all happened those last few weeks of the summer. Like, went from 100 to 200 to 300 to, like, 450, and just, like, was crushing it. And then the other girls also, like, stepped it up, like, doubled in their production. And yeah, like, all credit for the team is there. Like, they put in the work, they did it. And so I guess, like, my ponytail was kind of them. Like, they were just, like, amazing. And they built this really cool bond, and it was cool. So that's kind of where I was talking about, like, I asked God for 5 really cool Christian guys, and I got these 4 girls who got that. But man, like, I was so proud of them. I was like, I just watched, because for most of them, they were all from El Paso, and if you're a girl in El Paso, if you're anyone in El Paso, honestly, and you don't, like, get out, like, you stay in your hometown, and you don't go to college, and you don't really aim to do anything with your life, like, you fall into this cycle of, like, you get pregnant at 19 randomly, and then you're 25 and you have 5 kids, and they're from different dads, and that's just, like, a thing that happens. And so to see these girls who could have easily fallen in that situation just, like, go out, crush it, build confidence in themselves, like, actually discover ambition for their future was just, like, awesome, And so
Ooh, well, that's good.
Yeah, I also had health problems my 3rd summer. So which is where, like, I think I got more pushback my 3rd summer than my 2nd summer in terms of, like, the like, you're sick thing. Because what happened was I got in a car accident in March before my summer. And so going into the summer, I knew I had 5 herniated discs. So I had 2 in my neck and 3 in my lower back.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But going into the summer, I felt okay. Like, I was like, my back kind of hurts, but it's not a big deal. But carrying that book bag around, and like doing all that. After like week 3, or my 3rd week, because I this was like week 4 or 5 of the summer, because I had to go back to Texas, because basically a commercial truck hit me, and so there was a lot of like lawyer stuff to deal with, and like because there's a loss, and because they're very much at fault, and like I mean the lawsuit seems to be going well. It's still going on. It's taking forever, but it's like this huge personal injury case. But yeah, after like my 3rd week of selling, and this was my best summer yet in terms of like averages. Like I was like having a good time. I was like, this is cool. And I was working one day and I tried to get out of my car and my legs wouldn't move. And I was like, what is going on? And then like the feeling finally came back and I went to the doctor, and I basically, there was so much pressure on my disc that it was causing like nerve damage.
Yeah.
So I just couldn't do anything. Like my arms and legs would randomly go numb.
Yeah, dude. Yes.
Crazy. So
I have a bad lower disc. I think it's a disc. But I never had it officially checked out. But I lost I had to cancel an Austin Saturdays for a recording like a couple years ago because my left foot started going numb, especially in my pinky.
Yeah.
And the feeling wouldn't come back, and it like started losing color, and I was like, "What the?" And then I went to the chiropractor, and they adjusted my lower back, and I've been going once a week now because of that. But yeah, I get. I mean, I didn't have a loss of my entire legs, but I get what you mean. Where you're like looking at your legs, and you're like, "Why is this not like feeling it?" It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's
It was
crazy.
so weird. It was so scary, man. I was like, am I crippled? I was like, what? I was like, no way. So I started going to physical therapy. So the rest of my summer was literally just like going to physical therapy. And I made the same mistake where I kept trying to go back to work. For the first couple weeks, I was sick. But I had like this old Southern lady was my physical therapist, and she was like blunt, and it was just like, she was really funny. So this is in Alabama, and my physical therapist office is in Birmingham. By the way, Alabama, favorite state I sold in. Not the reputation it has, not true. Alabama's amazing. Caveat: Northern Alabama is amazing. Southern Alabama is the
Stereotypical.
yeah.
Is where people are their own cousins.
Yeah, it's like Mississippi, for sure. But Northern Alabama, like crazy. And it was funny because I lived in an HQ with 5 guys, and I don't know what's in the water in Northern Alabama, but probably the most like everyone was a supermodel. It was weird. Like,
whoa.
Everyone was like the most attractive person you'd seen that day, and then the next one. And it was so living with 5 guys, the stories from the guys we would get coming home was crazy. Just like we had this one kid in my HQ, he's like, dude, I swear this girl was giving me the eyes, man. You're lucky I was on schedule. And I was like, shut up. But yeah, so it was ridiculous, and but great time. And so this physical therapist, one day I'm like, hey, like every day I'd been asking, like, can I go back to work? And she's like, one day she'd be telling me no, and then one day she's like, yeah, you can go back to work. And I was like, okay, cool. And then she's like, yeah, but when you're crippled, you're not allowed to come back here for treatment. And I was like, damn, okay. And so she's like, I'm not playing games with you anymore. She's like, you need to like rest. And so, and it's like, so I changed my attitude. I was like, last summer I kept trying to fight it and I almost died. I'm just going to do my job is no longer to sell books. My job is to do everything they tell me to be and be coachable here. And so I actually progressed through my physical therapy pretty quickly, but the week I finally got cleared to sell was delivery week. So I just did my deliveries and like, that was it.
That's all right. No shame in that.
But it was good. So I went back and it gave me time to coach my girls more because I had nothing to do. So I was like looking at their stats all day, but yeah, and then in the fall I started picking up my health, and then so now I'm pretty solid. The nerve, I was able to wean off all the meds, which was a whole other thing. Because like in the summer, you know, I was on these different meds because the pain was so bad. I didn't realize this was that bad until recently. So I was taking muscle relaxers, not like painkillers, because my back would spasm. And so to stop that, they would have me take like methocarbamol and meloxicam and like a bunch of other meds. And yeah, it was like not I was taking like probably 5 muscle relaxers a day, like pills. You're supposed to take like 1 a day, but my pain was so bad that I was like popping those things. So and I'm a big guy too, but like that's what I was prescribed, was like 5 of those. And then I had to take gabapentin for like the nerves, for the nerve pain. And then I had to take, so the pain was so bad that it was causing me to react slower mentally. So like I took a cognitive test, and I got an 80 out of 200. So like this is another like,
Damn.
doctor was hilarious. Like I took the test and he's like, you got an 80. And I was like, awesome. And he's like, out of 200. Just killed my vibe.
That's below an F, bro. That's 40%. Yikes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And so yeah, I just like, it was a struggle. And so I had to take another med. But when you have really severe headaches, they make you take a low dosage of an antidepressant. And so if you're not like a depressed person, you take an antidepressant, it actually tends to make you depressed. And so, because you just feel empty, you know? And so you go from being like a pretty happy person to feeling empty, and that's pretty depressing, you know? So I was dealing with that. And so it was weird because, you know, like everyone's going out to work. And so I feel like a bum because I'm not working. And then at the same time, I'm dealing with like all these health problems, and my meds are making me depressed. And so it was just like a really awful combination. So it was, I think my third summer, even though my second summer I was like dying, might have been my toughest summer. Cause just like mentally was like rough, you know?
It's tough, dude.
But it kind of leads into what I do now. And so, and this is kind of where God works, because, you know, after my first summer, I was like, I think this happens a lot in the Visionaries. It's like you finish your first summer and you're like, I want to be a DSL. Like I'm going to be here forever. And I was very much like the Sammy Southwestern type. And so I thought my story was going to be like, I'm going to be in Southwestern forever. And my third summer, I think I realized like, I'm not going to be in Southwestern forever, but my life is going to be dedicated to God forever. And Southwestern was prepping me for that, you know, which I think is just as much of a success story as like doing Southwestern forever, you know.
Yeah. The proverbial stepping stone, brother.
Yeah. And so, but I never thought of it that way. So it was like a very weird thing, because I know other people go into Southwestern seeing it as a stepping stone. And I saw it as like, this is what I'm going to do forever. So it felt kind of like you were quitting, you know, to like leave. But so that summer, so I was getting really frustrated because the one Christian on my team quit. And so I was like, I have no Christian presence anymore. Like I was, you know, back home in San Antonio, you know, I'm going to 8 Bible studies a week. I'm going to 2 house churches a week, and I'm going to church. And I go to a ministry event every evening. Like I'm plugged in, you know?
Yeah.
And then in the summer, I'm dealing with all my problems, and I have no other like Christians around me. Because in my org, there wasn't really like a huge Christian presence now that my friend had left. So like I was getting really frustrated. And like one day, I literally was like, I'm just going to be dramatic. Like I'm just going to, because I'd been praying, but like you know, if you've been a Christian for a while, I think you can relate to this for like anyone listening, but like sometimes you hear God really clearly, and then sometimes you're just met with silence, and that silence is really tough, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I had been dealing with. And so I'm like, I'm just going to be dramatic. Like I'm going to get his attention. So I like drove out to this like river and I like this like river kids were playing in, by the way. And I like get in my bathing suit. I storm out to the middle of the river and I just start screaming. Like I'm just like Anthony, you know? And I do that for like a couple minutes, and then I just like have to walk back to my car. It's like embarrassing because there's just like these moms and their kids just like staring at
What the hell?
this guy. Yeah. Pretty embarrassing. But I go back and just still nothing. And then this is kind of where my like Catholic roots kind of play in here. So I grew up Catholic. And I kind of stopped being Catholic when my grandma passed away because she was like the main devout person in my life, you know. And then when she passed away, it was like, you know, I didn't feel like I had a tie to the church anymore. But I was feeling really nostalgic at the time. And there's a Catholic church in Birmingham, their cathedral, and it's in the same architecture style as the one I grew up going to. And so it just felt perfect. I was like, I need to go here. And so I went and I met with this priest and I did confession. And like at the time, by the way, I'm like super anti-Catholic, but I was just like, I'm not anti-Catholic anymore, but I was at the time. And so I was super skeptical of like going to confession, but I was like, I need to talk to somebody, you know? And my experience with churches in the South was not great. Like I would go to a church and be like, hey, like we just want to get plugged in. Like we're these Christian guys. We do ministry back in San Antonio. Like, and they would be like, oh, like come back Sunday. And then we would go on Sunday and they'd be like, they'd pass us off to like some like random person. Like they just did not want us there. And so this guy was the first like welcoming guy in Alabama in terms of churches. And, yeah, and he was a little goofy, but we do this thing, we pray, and it was really good. But what was really impactful was after. So after the confession, the church is like closing, and I'm like, hey, can I just stay in here and pray? And he's like, yeah, man, like you got it. Like just, you know, make sure to close up afterwards. And I don't know if you've ever been in a cathedral, but like, you know how you're not really supposed, like, there's some reverence, you know, like you sit in the pews, you don't really go up to the altar.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know, I try to be respectful, but I was just in such a tough place where I was like, I just need to go lay down on the altar, like not on the altar, but like in front of the altar, like on the carpet part, but in front of it. And so I just laid down there, and it was like every emotion that I had bottled up just like came out. And it was weird because it was one of the more like supernatural experiences I've had in terms of my Christendom. And I just like, even now, I still can't explain it. I don't like know what happened, but it felt like God was like, I'm here, you know? And it was just kind of an interesting event. And that was super impactful in my summer. And it was just very impactful on my faith, like in terms of
wild.
Yeah, and then I go back.
Super wild.
Yeah, it was crazy. And it was also crazy because this is like 5 p.m. on like a Wednesday when everyone is knocking on doors. I like get out of the church. I'm like, I feel like I should be knocking right now. But then I go back during the last day before we're going to drive to Nashville. I go back because I want to say bye to the priest, you know, I was like, and let him know what happened. And we're sitting there and in the confession booth, and he's like, hey, like, I think you're going to be a priest one day. And I was like, no way. But so, and I still have no desire to like give up a future family and like go be pious. But I did feel like, hey, I think I should move into ministry. And so that was this interesting feel because I actually wasn't excited about that. I was like, I don't want to do that because my concept of ministry is like, you're going to be starving for the rest of your life. Like,
yep. Hard to make a living. Yeah, it's tough.
And you know, we're in Southwestern. It's like you want to be successful and you want to make like money is. I know now they do a better job of like, you know, how hard you worked is how you determine success. But it's like everyone here is trying to be successful, which means make tons of money, you know?
Yep.
And so that was hard for me. So this is where Dan Moore comes in. At check-in, I have lunch with Dan Moore, and we have like a 2-hour long PC, which is the best PC I think I've ever had. And I kind of tell him about this, and he just was like, I don't know, man. Like talking to Dan Moore is like the closest thing to talking to Jesus. Like he's just so nice. He's just like, you talk to him and you're like, yeah, this guy has the heart of Christ in him. Like he's just so patient, and he just kind of told me, he's like, all that matters is that you focus on God, and if you just pray about it, he's going to answer. You know, that was just his answer. And we talked about, you know, relationships and wives, and I got to hear about his story with him and Maria, which was really cool. And his early days in Southwestern, like it's kind of wild. It was just like, oh, like this DSL's leaving. Someone needs to inherit the base. And
Yeah.
You know,
It's all those details, by the way, coming up on the Dan Moore episode, everybody.
there you go. It's pretty hype. Yeah. I'm excited to just hear them all over again. But yeah, and so that fall, I just kind of delved into my own personal ministry and was just trying to figure things out. Still recovering from a lot of the back issues, and also like was just waiting to get my check in January for my team. Like I had no money.
Oh yeah,
because I just didn't work that summer. So more landscaping stuff, and which is what I did the year before with my heart stuff, which isn't super wise. But yeah, but the cool thing was I got to go on GRG, which was cool with Dan Moore.
Yeah.
Won that trip.
Where did you guys go?
We went to the Azores. We went to Maria.
Oh, dude, yes.
It was awesome. Like. I felt so lucky. I'm like, all these other people who go on GRG like suckers. Like there's nothing as cool as this. And it's like Dan's retirement year, you know, it's like him and Maria's like send off. Was such a blast. And then and then after that, you know, went to go that's kind of when I decided I was gonna move into ministry. That was around the time I was like, I think I'm good, like I think I'm okay leaving Southwestern, you know. And then in March, so I move in with the Herlihy's, awesome host family, best host family ever. Steve will probably listen to this, and Steve, you're awesome. Ella, you're awesome.
Yes, sir. Steve's the best.
Yeah, they're at their lake house right now, so they are not here for me to tell them personally. But yeah, super great family, and so I decided to move into ministry. With the Navigators. So I don't know if you're familiar, but yeah. So we just had like our sales school type thing last week, and which was weird because, you know, it's in the air conditioning.
Yeah, and it's during sales school, like actual like Southwestern sales school is happening right now, or would have been happening at that point. Yeah.
So yeah, totally
wow, dude.
Experience, and yeah, so that's where I'm at now, and so it's been pretty cool. It's been a fun experience.
Damn, dude.
Yeah.
It's like we did the whole anthology. We did the whole series.
I think we had to. I think, you know.
Yeah.
I've been listening, and every time I listen, I'm like, well, actually, so every time I went through something tough the last 2 summers, I was like, at least when I'm done doing this, I can tell Andres about it, you know?
That's right. If you're listening, embrace that suck so that way you can come tell me about it later on. If you're currently in the bookfield, just think this is going to be a ponytail someday.
Yeah.
I appreciate that though. That's really nice of you to say.
Yeah. If anyone is listening that's like still on the bookfield, like, I mean, at the end of the day, like your day to day, and I told this to Tarpley, who's the Herlihy's daughter that's selling right now. I was like, at the end of the day, you know, however many books you sell doesn't really matter. It's like, are you a better person at the end of the summer than you were at the beginning of the summer? Like that's, I mean, end of the day, that's all that matters. Because I think people get too caught up, and I think that's how I framed my summers for a long time. And I was like, man, like, you know, my cousin just blew me out of the water. So like to my family, she's the success story, you know. But I think I've become such a different and such a better person than I was when I was 17, you know, which I think is true for anyone who is turning 20 from being 17.
But they're important formative years of your life. I mean, I never was the same person that I was every birthday from 16 to 25. From 25 to 26, I'm like, okay, I mean, I've grown, but not many things have changed substantially. But every year it seemed like if I just went back a year before, I'm like, whoa, this is not where I thought I'd be a year ago, you know? So I get what you're saying. And to have these experiences during that time is an important time to have. Like it's as impactful long term as it'll ever be, I think, in your early 20s and late teens. So
Yeah.
it's a good thing that it's happening in now.
I have to close this out. I have 2 cool stories.
Oh, okay. Well, hold on. We gotta do rapid fire questions, and then we'll do those two stories.
Okay, let's do that.
All right. Rapid fire questions. Here we go. What was your? Oh, I think some of these you already answered, so I'm gonna go through them quick because you said your favorite territory was Alabama.
Yeah.
So okay, so that's one of them. The second one is your favorite kind of turf: country, big brick, suburbs.
I like kind of the suburb, but like more rural type. That's my vibe.
That's what most people say. Favorite advanced sales?
Ooh, Virgie's Integrity one.
Oh, that's new. I don't know if I remember that one, but I love that. Favorite HQ? I think you said the pastor was your favorite HQ, but if that's not it.
Well, so I also had another HQ that summer with this really nice old lady who made like a 4-course feast every night.
What?
That was great. So they were tied. Also, worst HQ this last summer.
Wow.
That was crazy. We had oh man. She was addicted to some stuff, and she was a hunchback, and it was the best living option because our last thing was a tiny home that was infested with ants. So it was a tough HQ summer.
Wow.
But at least the summer before they were pretty good. So.
Wow. That's brutal.
Yeah.
Favorite product to tuck on or sell?
Ooh, Bible Atlas.
Hell yeah. Okay. Favorite overall summer?
3.
Okay. Best sales day? It doesn't have to be in units. It could be just it was your favorite day because it rained at 8, and you saw a rainbow. I don't know. Like what's?
Yeah, I had one day this last summer where I knocked in a neighborhood and everyone in the neighborhood sat down with me, and I think I had 8 customers.
That's the best. You don't even know how many units. You're just like, everybody loves me. It's so good.
That's where one of the funny stories comes in. So
okay. Favorite breakfast spot?
Ooh, Luigi's Pizzeria in Florida. I think it's Luigi's Pizzeria. It was or it might be Linguini's. Yeah, Brooksville. That's with the pastor. That was at HQ. They would open up for breakfast, and they had the biggest portions of any breakfast place I've ever been to for the cheapest. It was like $5 for like a giant platter of eggs, potatoes, bacon, sausage, the whole shebang. Yeah, that place. They would open early.
Pumpkin cheesecake is back 6
yeah.
months ago. Look at that. Got some pizza. Wow, that looks like some.
We never ate pizza there.
Luigi's, but this looks amazing.
Yeah, it was great, man.
It looks like the spot right there. Oh yeah, look at that. Boom. That's beautiful. Okay, last rapid fire question. Best follow day. Whether someone followed you or you followed them.
Oh, this is tough. Is this like impressive or just overall fun, or
could be whatever comes to mind? Just give me the first one that comes to mind that you thought of, because I feel like that's what's with you in your heart right now.
Yeah, I'm just thinking Leo. I followed Leo like a million times, and it was fun. Oh, it was the first day of my second. So I skipped sales school my second summer, and and I went straight to the field because I had school longer than everyone else. And so I had to follow the first day. And we had like 3 customers call me fat. Like, and it was crazy. Like, these were very fat people, by the way, calling me fat, which was hilarious. And they were just like, they were like, because you know how we say like, it's like, oh, like in the buying atmosphere, it's like, hey, don't worry about me. Like, you know, I'm still going to be able to eat tonight. You know, like you can say no, it's not a big deal. I'm not a starving college kid. And then people would be like, we know you're not starving. And it was just like, it was rough, man. But it was one of my favorite days. He had like, I think he probably had like 150 to 200 units that day. It was great.
Damn.
Yeah. He's a boss.
That's brutal though. But
Yeah.
it's all right. Oh man. Oh yeah, dude. This has been great. We've had some really good conversations on this one. Okay, let's do this. Let's get into your 2 stories. You got 2 ponytails to tell us for people listening. If this is your first time, these are the 2 stories that we have our guests say for the end because they are either the most impactful or the funniest or just in their current place are the ones that are the most memorable for whatever reason. So take it away, my good sir. These are your ponytails.
Okay. So the first one will be quick. This was just super cool. So I have been doing the spiritual timeouts at most of the Southwestern events for the last year or so. Basically GRS2 of last year to GRS2 before I
Wow.
decided to officially move on. And Trey's been great with that. Trey Campbell is fantastic. But at sales school, Dan Moore does it, right? And so this last sales school, we were there was a group from Olympus, the Colorado group, that's very Catholic, and so this Sunday, it was like the first day of sales school was like a Sunday or something. So they were organizing to go to mass, and I had asked Alex if we could go, who was my OL at the time, Alex Ramos Castro. And she was just like, hey, for like scheduling reasons, like it might be better if you just do a spiritual timeout with our group in the morning. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, 15 people, whatever. And then I invited like a couple people from other orgs who I knew like would want to go. And so I just think it's going to be like 15 people. I prepare like this talk. And thank God I prepared it because I get there, right? And we set up in the back of the like auditorium. And this is the really big sales school in Franklin, Tennessee, not the one at the company. And so I'm setting up chairs in the back of the auditorium. And one of the girls from the other orgs comes up and she's like, hey, like, I thought the spiritual timeout was for everyone. Like, we have the stage for you. And I was like, what? And so they clear out the room for all the people, and there's like 200 people left who are there for the spiritual timeout. And so I had to like preach to like 200 people. So I was like, thank God I prepared for that. And it was just like a really cool experience.
That's crazy.
I think people were crying. It was pretty fun. It was cool.
Wow.
And then so that was the cool thing. And then the other one, this is the funny story. So most people in Alabama are not incest couples. But I did meet one couple.
No.
Slightly in that realm. So let me explain, because this is crazy. And I might even have to draw out a diagram for this to make sense. So that day where like I sat down with everyone in the neighborhood, and it just like, it was a great day. Everyone's buying. One of the family, everyone had been telling me not to go to this one house, right? And so I'm like, of course I'm going to go there at the end of the day. Like, it'll be chill, right? Like, I just need to get them referred, and then I have like a really easy name. And so then one of my later sit downs, like getting close to like 6 p.m., like gravy time, was this really cool family. Didn't buy, but they're like, hey, so their names were Mary and Joseph, right?
No.
This couple that I sat down with. and they're like, there's a couple down the street that you should go talk to, but they're weird. And I was like, okay, tell me about it. So basically, I got this little chart. So you have Mary and Joseph. So
I want to
Mary,
make you the larger person on the screen, so wait, yeah, hold on, so I can see this better. Okay, here we go. Go for it.
so Mary's mom, right? Mary's mom married Joseph's little brother.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So Mary and Joseph are age-appropriate people. Mary's mom, who's like 65, married Joseph's little brother, who's like 25. Okay?
Okay.
Not incestuous, but kind of incestuous.
And lawfully incestuous. That's odd. Okay. Okay.
I go, and so they tell me on one condition, you can go if when you knock on the door, you tell him that you're looking for Uncle Grandpa, because that's what they call him. And I was like, okay, sweet. So I go up to the door, and this guy is like looking real aggressive, right? And I'm like, you know what? Let's just have fun. Like, this is my last sit down of the day, by the way. This is like 8:30 at night. And I just knew it was going to last a while. And so I'm walking up, and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for Uncle Grandpa. And he gets pissed. He's like, who told you that? Who sent you? And I'm like, I was just talking to Joseph, you know. And in Alabama, what I learned was like, there are some people where you need to make fun of them to earn their respect, to sit down with them. Like,
that's my entire life philosophy.
Yeah. So I start just like making fun of this guy. I'm like, yeah, like, you know, I heard that, you know, you hooking up with Mary's mom and like this whole thing. And I'm
This guy's 25 years old.
Yeah, he's pretty young. And so he's like, you know what, man, you're a cool guy. Like, I want to sit down with you. And so we go inside, and they have 2 kids, by the way. I couldn't figure out how this happened, or like if the kids are his or hers, but these are like, they had a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old.
Mary's mom.
Yeah. Which
And
I don't know how the
Joseph's
timeline works, because I'm like, for them to have the 10-year-old, he would have had to be like 15. Don't know how this works. Like, very weird.
Wait a fucking minute. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Hold on.
No.
Okay. These Mary's mom, we'll just gotta call her Susan.
Susan, yeah.
Joseph's little brother. We're just gonna call him Bro.
Yeah, Susan and Bro.
So Susan and Bro. Susan's would have been 55. Bro would have been 15 when they first had a kid, assuming either of them had the kid, but it's one of their kids.
Yeah, it's who they're taking care
They're
of.
not adopted. They're not adopted kids. They could have been adopted, I guess. That's the
Yeah.
other alternative. But they
look
share.
like them.
They
So-
share. Okay. So that would make the kids Mary's sister and Joseph's nephew.
Yeah.
Oh, what the?
So totally confusing, right? But oh my god. So I get in there, right? And Mary is acting all negative, right? Because apparently he's supposed to scare away solicitors. And he's like, no, Susan, you know, he's like, he's cool, and I want you to sit down with him. And she's like, why don't you sit down with him? You're the one who wants to talk to him. And he's like, because you're the one who makes the money in the family.
Oh boy.
I was like, okay. And so so this is how he gets her to sit down. He says, if you don't come sit down, I'm not going to give you any tonight. And I'm like, this is weird.
Hold on. So Susan is the one that doesn't want to sit down. Mary's the one that doesn't want to sit down.
Susan doesn't want to sit down with me.
Oh, so okay. So
At this point, it's Bro and Susan. Yeah.
So Bro and Susan. So he's telling Susan, if you don't come sit down with me.
Yeah, you're not getting any.
Okay, great. Awesome. Oh, okay.
And
peeling back another layer of this odd onion.
Yeah, so I start showing them the stuff, and they actually really like it. They bring out the kids who like are in their underwear, which is weird. But they're just like sitting there, and they're in their underwear, and I start showing them the books. They end up picking up Explore and Learns and Mufus. The Mufus were for the 10-year-old because he still couldn't read, and the Experience were for the 7-year-olds because apparently he was a great reader.
Roll Tide, baby.
Yeah, it was interesting. So they pick up those books, and then she's like, he starts telling me about how he likes to spank Susan, and how the whole time they're like talking about being intimate, which is just really uncomfortable.
It's odd because the odds of either of these two people being even remotely attractive, where that might be enjoyable for some others, is still low. And so therefore it's like uncomfortable that's an uncomfortable situation even if they were attractive, but it's like the fact that it's like not ideal and weird and everything so far has been odd. This makes it like uber gross.
Oh yeah. I was like, what is going on? But hey, they were a pony, I guess, but just the weirdest. Oh, and then so to close this out, so you know how they met, because I had to ask. So the reason they met was because so Joseph runs a landscaping company.
Oh boy.
And so him and Mary and Joseph had just gotten married, and Joseph wanted to do something nice for Susan because it's like, this is my mother-in-law. And so he had his burnout little brother go like be her pool boy.
Oh God, no, this is so bad.
And they started hooking up, and then they had a couple kids presumably, and they got married. And so Mary and Joseph hate them now. So
oh God, that's odd. That's so weird. I sold to an incestuous couple, but they were actually brother and sister. It wasn't until later I found out, but this is just weird dynamic.
Yeah,
like a funeral would be so odd. To be like, if you farted at a funeral, it'd be less awkward than whatever that would be.
Oh yeah, this was the most Alabama thing that I could have. Sweet Home Alabama.
Sweet Home Alabama. Wow, baby, Roll Tide. What an episode.
I used to be unironically a Roll Tide fan, but my girlfriend went to UGA, and so I have to rep the Georgia.
Oh, jeez.
So go dog.
Jeez. Well, Alabama. Wow.
What are you guys? Go Cornhuskers? Is that what it is?
Go Huskers, bro.
Yeah. That's so bad. Cornhuskers.
Hey, we don't have incestuousness. Oh, that's so rough.
That's fair.
We probably do, but that's that dude, Uncle Grandpa.
Oh yeah,
bro, Uncle Grandpa. Good stuff. Oh man. Well, guys, we're going to wrap this one up here. Thank you so much, Andres, for being on here, man. Oh, this is fun. This is great. Thanks for talking to me about the interesting things about El Paso and being brown. That's a lot to chew on.
Yeah.
So
that'll be an interesting conversation. People are going to be like, "What is this?
What's happening?" Yeah. And if you made it this far, thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. My name is Andres Gamboa. We will be closing it out here today. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.